This is James Arnold Taylor, voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Welcome to a more civilized podcast. This is the podcast you're looking for. You may not go about your business. Stay here, listen, and then move along.
Okay, well, I'm your ill host, Kyler.
How are you feeling, Chris?
I'm all right. I might be on the way out.
Sorry, my head's full of snot. This is a more civilized podcast. I remember how to do this, I promise. And I'm Kyler.
Do you need to get you some pills or something? Do you need some cold medicine?
I just need more sleep than I'm getting.
Oh,
that's legit.
Yeah.
Yep. I need
We're all
like
in that
48
boat
hours of like good solid sleep, and I just don't see that happening for a while.
That's fair. Well, I'm Chris, and I'm not sick.
I'm Ross, and I'm doing okay.
Not physically sick. You're sick in the head,
yeah,
though.
naturally,
Yeah.
but no more than normal.
Yeah.
Not yet. I mean, that might be coming.
And
I
Ross, of
also
course,
have not
is-
been sleeping much.
Yeah.
Ross, of course, is pure as the driven snow.
I'm
so-
adequate.
Hey. There you go. Oh, anyway, well, thanks for joining us one more week. For one more week this week again. Again, you're here again one more time. I appreciate it.
There will be further episodes after that, so don't want you to worry that we're only doing one more week.
I just want you to know, listeners, how much I appreciate you downloading each week and listening to what we have to say, even though it's not very important.
Telling your friends and growing the
I do
family.
appreciate
You are doing that, right? Right?
whoever the heck, whoever the crap downloaded in Thailand. I'm sure you're here by mistake, but we appreciate you anyway.
Yeah.
Wait, yeah, what's Taiwanese for hello?
Or no, that would be Taiwan, not Thailand.
I think it's just Thai.
It's just Thai.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thailand.
Yep.
Yes.
Ross is exhibiting typical American behavior where we don't really care about anything outside of our own country.
Geography, world geography is not one of our strong suits.
Well, speak for yourself.
I was going to say. I'm all right at it.
Well, yeah, I guess, never mind. You two are farther
After
traveled.
Mrs. Burdett made us take that European countries and
Oh, man, that was brutal.
capitals
Yeah.
quiz, I can still name, show me a map. I can still name country and capital for every country in Europe.
I'm okay with Europe because of
Because it's cool.
medieval Total War.
Well, yeah. That's, that.
So
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Video
That is
games
helpful.
for the win.
That's right.
Actually, I think I can do it with most... I can do countries of the world pretty well. Africa gets a little weird in the middle.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then capitals. I can do capitals for the Western Hemisphere, no problem. Europe, no problem. Australia, no problem. Most of Asia. Africa gets a little iffy.
But what about Star Wars capitals? Bringing it back, everyone. Bringing the episode
Coruscant
back.
is the only capital that matters.
That's right. Or that we've really heard of, really.
Well, I mean, it was sort of it's the capital of the... Well, I guess, okay. Star Wars capitals, real quick. Coruscant for the Republic.
Yeah. And the Empire.
Osmian type.
And the Empire, yeah. And then a rotating series
Yes.
of capitals, which is the dumbest idea ever. Good on you, Chuck Wendig. You're a moron. So you had Chandrila, and then Hosnian Prime,
Yep.
and then not Hosnian Prime anymore.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if they've mentioned the Chiss homeworld's name.
Nope. Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I don't think they did in the books, in Thrawn books.
Rotating capital. That's the dumbest idea ever. Talk about wasted taxpayer dollars moving the infrastructure of the bureaucracy every, he said 5 years or something like that. It's
that's legit.
that is so stupid. That is unbelievably wasteful.
All right.
Where were we?
I believe we were looking at doing some newsy news.
Yes. We were on our way to the newsy news section. He's too sick to even really care. He just kind of glares.
Newsy news. Oh, I forgot to post my photo. I'll have to put that in the Facebook group after we're done recording here.
I tell you, we need
Last
to just
time I took a
lean into
photo
it.
of his response.
Oh, that's
his
right.
reaction,
That's
and
right. I forgot
said
about
I'd post it and forgot.
Indeed.
So by the time you're listening to this, that will be in the Facebook group for you to enjoy.
So,
Yeah,
I mean,
unless I
we
forget
are
again.
adequate after all.
we have 2 bits of juicy news. Newsy, juicy news. Juicy, newsy news for you today.
Juicy juice newsy news.
Juicy... Yes.
Jamba
those.
News?
What?
Jamba the
Jamba News? Like Jamba Juice?
Yeah.
Jamba the Hutt.
Juicy News?
Jamba the Hutt news. Sure.
The juicy news. Give us the juicy news, Ross.
Newsy, juicy news. So, first, we have a little bit of a follow-up of our discussion from last episode, which I mostly cut, which I don't think you two realized.
I looked at the length of the episode and I went, oh, he probably cut most
And you're
Yeah.
a coward, Ross.
I'm a coward.
You're a coward.
No, see, here's the thing.
You even cut the part where I explained it to you, and you were like, "Okay, now that actually makes sense." You didn't
You're
even
right.
leave that in.
I did, you're right. Well,
Ross.
part of the reason was because I went and I marked where we had both we had gone through our theses once, marked it there, then just went to the end and just like, yep, everything else can go. I should have left that in, you're right, I'm sorry.
That's all
But
Put
the
it
thing
in the
is,
outro for this episode.
the thing is I was getting so pissed off listening to it again. I was just like, no, we're just gonna.
Ross was quite upset to listen to himself be wrong all that time.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of, the first thing we're going to talk about is a little bit inconclusive, but
Yeah.
Kyler put this in the show notes with his own little edition of "Dang It, Ross is Right" or something like that. Whatever you put, I don't even have it up
It was
anymore.
just dang it, Ross.
Yeah. So, a website called Epic Stream, which first of all, I guess we should ask: do we know how credible
Epic
this site
Stream,
is?
I don't know of any history of problems with them. So
Okay.
I don't know.
The title of this, well, okay, so first of all, if you didn't listen to the last episode, the discussion was about the stupidness or not of putting the one episode of The Mandalorian moving it out of its air position.
Ross insisted that it was moved up because it's going to tie into Rise of Skywalker somehow, and that's why they needed it to air first.
Chris
Kyler
and I vehemently disagree
yeah,
with
we just
that.
believe that's a marketing decision,
Yeah,
so
that's
it's not
just-
airing it on the same day.
Well, it wasn't that the plot of the episode would have something to do with it, but that something in the episode would have something to do with it. There'd be like an Easter egg or something.
And Chris and I both the summary of Chris and I's point is Chris and my point is just that it got moved forward so that Mandalorian could still get one full uninterrupted day of hype before getting completely steamrolled by episode 9.
Yep. And that if they were going to do an Easter egg, they would tell us in advance, because
Yeah.
otherwise it's useless.
Yeah. Yes, that was their points. I'm going to forego mine just to read the article because I don't want to get into it again.
Come on, Ross.
So, anyway, this article on this website called Epic Stream is titled "Star Wars: The Mandalorian Switches Dates for New Special Tie-In with the Rise of Skywalker." Now, reading that just on its own, it does sound like, oh, looks like Ross is right. But the article is a little bit less clear. It talks about how,
So
I'll
Ross
read,
is less right?
maybe.
You were right. I was less right. One of the most frequently quoted movie lines in my household.
Yeah. The one particular paragraph in question reads thus. Disney just recently revealed that the penultimate episode for the first season of Jon Favreau's hit live-action Star Wars series The Mandalorian, it's too long to read, is getting an exclusive sneak peek during screenings for Rise of Skywalker, giving fans more incentive to see the film early, as if they needed any other incentive other than the fact that there's a new Star Wars film. So, as we've been sitting here, my first thought was, well, that's kind of weird to go with the title. But that must have meant that they must have had early screenings of Rise of Skywalker that they said, hey, watch the Mandalorian episode.
Yeah.
But then when Chris read it to us, I was like, no, that means there's going to be sneak peeks for the Mandalorian with the Rise of Skywalker.
At the Rise of Skywalker screenings, but then it's releasing the day before Rise of Skywalker, so they'd have to be
So
very
that doesn't
early
make sense.
screenings.
Yeah.
Well, and
Is
see,
it
and that's the
critic
thing, though.
screenings, but then that doesn't make
But
sense.
yeah, why would you? You
advertise
don't
it
need to
widely.
encourage critics to go
Right.
to.
Yeah.
Well, and they're also making, and they can't be talking about the final episode because the final episode releases a week after.
Well, see, and that's what made me wonder is if they said penultimate and they actually meant final episode of the season, like it's going to continue.
They incorrectly used a big word because they pulled out their thesaurus. And
Yeah.
they're
Quite
trying to
possible.
sound smart.
Yeah.
I could buy that.
Well, and because there's one episode after, and so this isn't the one that's moved that they're talking about.
That would
but,
make
yeah.
sense is if we moved the penultimate episode to the day before Rise of Skywalker starts releasing, 2 days before the actual release date.
Yeah.
And that way, people and we say, oh, by the way, you can get a sneak peek of the final episode of Mandalorian, which you have to wait a week and a half for, if you go to these screenings. Not that people need encouragement,
Yeah.
but actually, some of the people who are most into The Mandalorian may in fact be the ones that need the most encouragement to go see Rise of Skywalker.
So, yeah, we'll still see. Actually, I guess those of you listening to this episode will probably already know because this releases the day of the early
yes, that's
Mandalorian
true.
episode. So
let us know.
Yeah. Well, we'll know by the point you'd get to it anyway. So come have a good conversation on the Facebook group. There.
Sure.
Self-plug. Yeah. So, anyway, we are still going to see who's right. I do have other things to add to that discussion, but I don't feel like doing it now. We can do that later.
Fair enough.
Next, we have, that's right, the juiciest news of this last week or so. And it's just as stupid as everything else. So, I'm sure those of you that follow Star Wars recently have heard all the drama surrounding what actors have said in regards to The Last Jedi and Rian Johnson, and how there were comments by JJ and John Boyega and all this stuff
Daisy
talking
and
about
this,
yeah.
that, and the other.
So yeah, lots of things have been blown out of proportion, taken out of context. Both John Boyega and in this case that we're gonna look at here, JJ, have had to come out and be like, no, that's not what we meant.
Yeah. Well, Daisy did the same thing too. Yeah.
Did she?
Yeah.
Well, is she back on, or was she like doing interviews or something?
Yeah.
Because she's been off media for
She had
a
one
long
where
time.
basically what she said was like, it was nice to have a familiar face back. It was nice to have JJ back working on this. And the tone of it was very much just this simple, like, yeah, it was good to have someone we knew, like we liked JJ and he was there and that was cool. But a ton of people were like, see, it's because she hated Rian Johnson and she was so glad to have him gone and to have JJ back. And it's like, that's literally not what she said at all.
Yeah.
Daisy Ridley has been extremely vehement about like straight up smacking down anyone who goes after The Last Jedi. Like, she does not mince words about that. And which is what happened after this, as she got on Twitter and was just like, stop being stupid, basically.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and there was a similar thing with John Boyega and something about Kelly Marie Tran. There isn't a good synopsis of that one, but it was a similar sort of thing.
Well, he had a couple comments that
most of
people
that.
were latching onto. The only one I saw was one where he was basically saying it's just like, yeah, I was kind of disappointed in Last Jedi that I didn't get to spend as much time with my co-stars from the last movie because we were all on different paths.
Yeah.
That was basically it. And people were just like, oh, see, he was disappointed in The Last Jedi. And it's like, ah, God.
Well, finally...
But he did say other things that were a little more... I don't know. I didn't go into all of them.
I remember I saw someone's tweet saying something about John Boyega saying something against Kelly Marie Tran, but which sounded really odd to me, but I didn't follow it through.
At this point, I just kind of go like, yeah, people blowing crap out of proportion. It's not accurate.
Yep.
We've seen this enough.
And then the final one was JJ's comments. He had made some sort of statement somewhere talking about how like there were choices that he wouldn't have made for Last Jedi or something like that. I don't remember exactly what those were.
Yeah.
But he finally released I don't know if it was an email or whatever it was that people are screenshotting here. But he says there were a lot of details and story points that Rian set up in Last Jedi that we run with in this movie. I don't think this movie would have been nearly what it is without the choices that Rian made, so I'm nothing but grateful.
Yeah. I mean, and he's repeatedly been on the record of just like, no, like, remember, he was a producer for The Last Jedi. He signed off on the script. His description of it was when he read the script, he liked it so much that he wished he was making the movie.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Come on.
Well, and people, took that one out of context and be like, see, he hated what Rian was doing. He thought he could do it better, but that's not the tone of that.
Yep,
that
no,
statement.
not at all.
So, anyway, believe...
But hey, when all you have is a hammer, then every statement is a nail.
That's right. Yeah, so believe very little of what you read on Star Wars Twitter.
Yeah, or on the internet in general.
Really, yeah.
Or anywhere, ever. Be skeptical about everything. Are we real? Are you really hearing us? We're probably not.
Oh, wait a minute. How was it in Prestige? Believe half of what, or nothing you hear, but only half of what you see? Or is that a phrase that's other places too?
I don't know.
I remember
hearing
it in Prestige, but anyway.
I only watched the Prestige once. I haven't seen it since. I don't recall.
That was a deep reference, Ross.
Yeah, it was.
That's nice.
That's a good movie.
That's not bad.
Yeah. Anyway, that is the juiciest, newsiest news juice you will ever partake of.
Juice. Please don't ever say that again.
News juice. I love it.
Yes.
Some juicy, newsy news juice.
Mark my words, listeners. You have just witnessed the birth of another thing I'll use to annoy Kyler occasionally. Anyway, so what are we talking about?
You can only use juicy to describe the newsy news when we have particularly boring news.
Okay, yes.
It's like, this news is so juicy.
Got it. So what are we talking about today, guys?
We are talking about The Last Jedi.
Oh boy.
Again.
Again.
Yeah, so a little bit of backstory on where this episode came from. So basically, like, we've had discussions about The Last Jedi since here and there. I've wanted to do another episode just kind of collating some of it, some things that I didn't get to in the last one, particularly because I had some of my favorite things about the movie are things that I was really having trouble putting into words. And now that I've had over a year to reflect on it, I've gotten to a point where I was like, oh yeah, I can do that pretty well now. But also because Rise of Skywalker is about to come out. By the time this episode airs, we will be less than 32 hours away from seeing it. And Rise of Skywalker is going to change the conversation around The Last Jedi forever. Like, it's going to be this bizarre thing. We'll look back 40 years from now and just be like, oh yeah, there were 2 years there where everyone was talking about The Last Jedi without
minds.
the full set of the trilogy to look at.
For perspective, this is similar to the 80s when Return of the Jedi hadn't come out yet and everybody's losing their mind and arguing over what happens at the end of Episode 5. You know, how dumb is it that Han is trapped in carbonite? That's so stupid. He should have gotten away. Vader shouldn't have cut Luke's hand off. That's, whatever.
Leia shouldn't have chosen Han. She was clearly meant to be with Luke.
Exactly. All that kind of stuff that you go, well...
This is retconning the last movie.
Yep.
So ridiculous. Yeah.
Yep.
And for me, it's a particular thing, though, where I'm like, I want to discuss it again now in this little window where we've got, because I don't feel that The Last Jedi needs another movie to help round it out. Like, I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to seeing it as a full set of 3 movies and what they do with it. But regardless of what Rise of Skywalker does, Last Jedi is an excellent movie, in my opinion, and I wanted to talk about it one last, just get the most out of these last precious seconds of this particular narrow little window of discussion.
Which also, listeners, you may want to take a glance at the time code now. We don't know how this is going to go.
Yeah.
So, it
might be a bit longer.
You might be able to finish your drive to work with this episode. Maybe not.
Yeah.
Might go longer.
Well, and also, so if you've been listening to the last couple weeks worth of episodes, I made a Google Doc, opened it up for anyone to come in and give me what their bigger complaints about the movie were. Or I had a section for major complaints, moderate complaints, and minor complaints, and then things that people liked. And I got about 10 responses. 3 of those were just people giving me stuff they liked. And then another 1 or 2 of those had stuff that they both liked and disliked, and the rest were just dislikes. I've also included some things that I've come across in discussions with people here and there, and things that I see a lot on the internet, just to kind of round out, like, hey, I don't really feel like we addressed this very thoroughly in the last episode. Did go back and listen to that, which was a combination of frustration and pleasing, like a couple times where I'm sitting there like, what are you doing, you fool? Just bring this up. Come on. You've thought that through now. And a couple times where I was saying that, and then I did bring it up, and I was like, oh, good job, Past Chris. And 1 or 2 points, too, where I was listening to me, and I was like, nah, it's just dumb. That doesn't hold up. I don't really feel like that opinion is valid. But anyway, so, discussing The Last Jedi again.
Here we go.
So first off, I've brought up this distinction a couple times in various episodes. I'm not necessarily trying to get anyone to like The Last Jedi. Like, I don't mind if that happens.
Before you get into this, I want to share with the listeners. So, I wasn't sure how much of the watch party on the 13th I would be able to attend. So, on the 12th, so the day before the watch party, I watched episodes 6, 7, and 8. Just in anticipation of episode 9 coming out, and I thought, well, I was going to start with 7. And I was like, well, Palpatine, they've been hyping that up. You know what? For good measure, I will go watch the Palpatine movie and start with episode 6 and see what, I can and did mostly quote that movie, like a quote along, as it was going, and then watched episode 7 and then watched episode 8. And that was actually really nice, and I know some of it has to do with Chris's persistence on the good qualities of episode 8, where I was like, okay, I can appreciate that. I noticed a lot of other things didn't bug me as much as they did initially.
I had the same experience watching it last night.
And, but anyway, so I just want you guys to know that, yeah, like, I literally watched this movie yesterday.
Yeah.
So it's pretty fresh in my mind.
I watched it last night with the commentary just to see if I could get any new tidbits or anything. I didn't really get anything new, but I did have a couple points where I was like, vindication. Where I was like, this is what Rian Johnson was trying to do there. And then I listened to the commentary and Rian Johnson was like, well, this is what I was trying to do here. And I was like, ha! Nailed it! So that was nice. But, so yeah, not necessarily trying to, like, I get people don't like the movie, might not, like, opinions are hard to change. A lot of the things that people are, their reasons for disliking the movie aren't necessarily things that I'm going to disagree with. But I always do like to make the distinction between liking a movie and the movie being good, or disliking the movie and the movie being bad, or at least well made or poorly made. Like, those are different things. I don't care for 99% of Charles Dickens' writing. That does not mean I think he's a bad writer. Like, that would be pretty presumptuous of me to claim when he's, one of the pillars of English writing. He is an excellent writer, and I can appreciate a lot of what he's good at. That doesn't make me like his stuff anymore. My biggest complaint is just that I'm not going to get into Charles Dickens right now. Like, that's not valid. Sorry, I'm going to
Charles Dickens.
Yeah, I'm going to try and keep my tangents to a minimum. But so it's like, yeah. Mainly what I'm addressing here is this is a well-made movie. If you like it, dislike it, that's fine. I'm not bothered, but disliking it does not make it bad. There's a separation there. So, I've been talking about The Last Jedi with people for a good 2 years now, particularly heavily in the last year, once we started this podcast. And I've gone through and actively watched a lot of videos or read a lot of articles on these. One or two people linked me to some in their complaints in the survey. Some were some I had seen and some were not. But most complaints I hear about The Last Jedi fall into 4 different categories. So I'm going to break those down just for handy reference later on, where I'm going to say, okay, this is one of those. This is one of those. So the first category is politics. I don't like the politics of this movie, or I don't like that it has politics at all. Now, a movie having politics that you dislike or having politics in it is a perfectly valid reason for you to dislike that movie. Like, that's for you personally to dislike something, that's fine. A lot of people will be like, oh no, you have to stand apart from that, and you can't dislike something just because it doesn't agree with you. And I'm just like, no, that's bull. All those people are doing it too. Everybody does. And part of it is just a suspension of disbelief thing, It's like if you are an avid gun control enthusiast and you see a film that has, people using guns to save lives, and it's basically the right-wing stance on that, that's not going to ring true to you, because that's not what you believe about the world. That's just a thing. However, again, there's a difference between you not liking the politics or the politics being there at all, and that doesn't actually affect the quality of the movie. And so unless someone can tie the presence of those politics or the way they are expressed to a problem in the movie and show how that causes a problem, which can happen, I don't really care. It's like, I'm not going to go through and argue about people's politics for the most part in this episode. Cool. If you don't like the politics, oh well. Sorry. Bummer. There will be more Star Wars in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but so I agree with you that there are lots of different political views, some of which may agree with you, some of which may not, and their presence or lack thereof doesn't inherently make the movie bad or good. Mm-hmm. I fully agree. But what if a certain brand of politics is included so much in a movie that the movie then feels more like an ad in favor of that political view, or an attack on those who
feels
don't.
More like propaganda.
Yeah, feels more like propaganda. I mean, I think that would then affect the quality of the film.
That could be a situation where you could argue that it is impacting it, certainly.
Because I think that is where a lot of people had problems with The Last Jedi, is they felt more like the movie particularly Admiral Holdo's sort of the poster child for that. That her moments were so heavy-handed with politics that those moments feel like propaganda, which lowers the overall quality of the movie.
Well, yeah, let's just jump into this here then. That's
oh, sorry, I didn't.
No, you're great. You're great.
Thunder,
I've got an outline, but it's like
Yeah.
that's mostly just for speed, and we can address this here just as easily. So I got a couple things on that I was going to bring up, and one is that first, for the people who are like, oh, you shouldn't have politics in Star Wars, I'm like, George Lucas has been pretty thoroughly on the record that that Star Wars was his reaction to the Vietnam War. The Empire is the United States. The rebels are the Viet Cong. Like, that was basically what he was going for, is that we are becoming the evil empire from these sort of classic stories. Like, it started out political. Like, there's always going to be politics, even if he wasn't as overt with it, possibly.
Well, and that's the thing.
Here's my thing is, the more I've watched this, the more I've been like, are they really as overt as people say on both sides? Because there's clearly a lot of gut reaction. Go back and listen to our 6th episode concerning The Last Jedi. We addressed this. I didn't argue with it. It seemed pretty clear to me. But particularly when it comes to issues of gender politics, racial politics, when you've got issues of bigotry, and we're displaying racism and sexism and this, that, and the other. One of my favorite tools for assessing how well or how much a movie or any sort of story does that is this thought exercise of like, okay, let's take all the characters in this story and let's homogenize them. Let's make them all the same gender, the same race, the same everything. Just imagine that. Don't change anything else. The only changes we make to the dialogue is just 100% only change pronouns to fit whatever we're doing, and that's it. Does this plot still function? Because if the plot still functions when you take out any racial or gender identifiers, or at least differentiations, then the plot maybe wasn't that heavily about that in the first place. So, for example, remember the Titans. Mm-hmm. If you turn every character in that into a black man, or a black woman, or a white man, or whatever, it makes absolutely no sense. The movie won't function, And now, obviously, that one is blatantly like, that is what that is about. Sure. Hidden Figures, same thing. Make these all black women, and that doesn't make sense. Why are all these people giving these 3 black women so much crap, but not each other? Like, it's because without those racial or gender differentiations, it doesn't make any sense anymore.
Sure.
Another example that I thought of is Galaxy Quest. If everyone in that movie is a woman, then Sigourney Weaver's character no longer makes any sense. It's like, why is this particular woman
tasked with the useless job?
Yeah. When all the other women aren't. And it's like, no, it's that the whole point of that is that she is the lone woman, and that even a series as politically progressive as Star Trek was and always has been wasn't really giving its women a fair shake in its original series, and later on it got better over time, obviously. But that's the both a joke and commentary there, is that she gets treated like crap because she's a woman, and then like some plots, it's interesting to study books and stuff and look at those where it's like some will ostensibly be about that, but then when you actually dig into it, it's like an example is there's a book called The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison. It's a good book. I really enjoy it. It's about you've got this elven empire, all these elves, and then you've got goblins who are basically just elves with darker skin, like they're black elves. And the emperor's 4th son, he had like 3 or 4 sons with his first wife, and then he married for political reasons, married a goblin from a neighboring kingdom. They had 1 son, and then she passed away, and he didn't care for her, didn't care for his half-goblin child, and so just kind of banished him to a backwoods area and forgot about him. And then an assassination kills basically everyone ahead of him to the throne, and he just suddenly gets tossed in as the emperor of this white elf kingdom, and he's a dark goblin. And so a lot of people hold up this book as like, oh yeah, this is about, see, look, this is about racism, and this is about this and this. And then I'm like, but the thing is, if you actually pay attention, it's not. Like, it was obviously intended to be. Characters reference his race and everything, but nobody actually treats him badly because of his race, ever. Like, he deals with assassination attempts and this, that, and the other, but all those people have political motivations. They're trying to grab power. They're trying to do this or that or the other. Nobody is treating him badly in that book because of his race. And it's this kind of oversight where I'm just like, I'm sure she intended, like, it's pretty clear from what she said and this, that, and the other. She intended to write a story about racial differences and everything, but actually everyone just kind of is, like, really uncomfortable, like, oh, we don't know this kid. We don't know if he's even going to be able to handle this because he's not trained for this. And then just kind of slowly go, all right, he's doing all right. We're fine with this. And that's it. And I'm like, what you've actually accidentally written here is a story about how this person's fear of being treated differently because of their race crippled their ability to just get out there and interact with people, which is
an awesome lesson to learn.
Which is a thing that happens. And, but it wasn't what she meant it to be. So, okay. So we have The Last Jedi. Every single plot in this movie works if you homogenize the characters. Every single one. Doesn't matter in the slightest. Rey and Luke, nothing there is based on gender.
Yeah.
You know, he's not hesitant to teach her because she's a woman. It never comes up at all. He's hesitant to teach her because he doesn't want to teach anyone, first of all, because she reminds him too much of him. She reminds him too much of Kylo. Like, all these things are still going to apply no matter what her character is. It doesn't matter if they're both men, if they're both women. Doesn't matter. If they're both amorphous blobs. Doesn't matter. Finn's entire storyline, Finn and Rose, again, not an issue. Like, it's never brought up. She's, like, you know, nothing's going to change if they're both female or if they're both male. The kiss at the end would still be equally out of nowhere, you know, but it would still, you know, the lack of build-up there would be the problem, not the, you know, it's, and so the plot still makes sense. And even Poe and Holdo would still function just fine.
Yeah.
If they're both male, if they're both female. Because his reasons for being uncomfortable with her, a lot of people point to, like, oh, it's because she's a woman and he can't handle a woman in authority. And it's like, well, but he clearly was fine with Leia in authority. He's uncomfortable with her because she is not being a great commander. She is being dismissive. She is withholding information. Yeah. And, you know, it's her off-putting command style and her not great choices with how to handle this guy that she's dismissive of.
It's funny that you say that, because I was thinking about that while I was watching Last Jedi yesterday. I was like, you know, I was thinking about Holdo and things that you'd said before, and I was like, you know, it really can't be about women, though, because if she were a man acting this way, I'm pretty sure Poe would be doing the same thing.
Exactly.
Like, if not just, like, straight up killing the commander or something, like full-on mutiny, you know what I mean? Like a permanent mutiny.
And if they were both women, it would be the same way.
Yeah.
An interesting thing that I've thought of is if you flip the genders, if Poe is a woman and Holdo is male, people would still be accusing the male of being the sexist one here. Mm-hmm. They would be pointing at Holdo, and that scene where Holdo's in Poe's face and is all just like, oh yeah, you're reckless, a little bit dangerous, and exactly not what we need right now. And they'd be like, oh, why is this male commander, like, coming on to his female subordinate? This is an abuse of power. He's being sexist and da-da-da. And I'm like, okay, if the sexism swaps characters without changing anything else just because you've changed the gender, well, it might be that you're bringing a lot of your own baggage into this, not that it's there.
Yep.
And the more I looked at it, the more I was like, Rian Johnson has actually written a fairly balanced thing. It's mainly just how many men are being directed by women in the film. Like, in most character arcs, you're gonna have the character who's going through the arc, and then you're going to have someone who is trying to get them to go through the arc, trying to get them to change for the better. Sometimes you might have more than one character trying to get them to change for the better. Sometimes you might have one trying to get them to change for the better and one trying to get them to change for the worse. Zuko's a great example of this in Last Airbender, where he's got Iroh trying to convince him to be good, Azula trying to pull him back to being not a great person. He even has a, like, fever dream where he is the Fire Lord and he has two dragons trying to advising him, each in different directions. One is Azula and one is Iroh. Like, it doesn't get much more direct than that.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of people, I think what makes this stands out big, and I'm not saying it's not there. Obviously, I had the same reaction as everyone else. You can go back and listen to that last episode, but I think a large part of it is just that it's like, oh, Poe is being told what to do by, like, he's got two characters telling him what to do that are both trying to pull him in the right direction, and they are Holdo and Leia. You've got Finn is being told what to do. He's got one pulling him in the right direction, one pulling in the wrong one. The wrong one is DJ, male. The right one is Rose, female. And you've got You've got Rey is our only woman going through a character arc. She's got 2 characters pulling her simultaneously. Both of her advisement characters are giving her bad advice and good advice. They are Luke and Kylo, respectively. And then you've got Luke, who has 2 good advisement characters, Rey and Yoda.
Yeah, but look at Kylo's abs. No, she's got a point.
Yes. So Luke's got a woman telling him what to do, but he also has Yoda, and Yoda's the one who actually gets through to him in the end. It's not Rey. Rey convinces him to reach out to the Force again, like kind of
Rey is pulling
wakes
him
up
in the right direction, but she's doing so poorly.
She's
doing so in a bad
which is why
way.
she doesn't get. And part of it is because she is naive.
Yeah.
Like the part Luke has had his naivete shattered, she has not, and so she's sitting there. She's jumping in like, yeah, you'll go fix everything, and then when he and Kylo between them finally convince her that no, he's not going to fix this. She immediately spins around and goes, "Oh, Kylo, I'll just redeem him. It'll be that easy." And Luke's like, "No, it won't. Like, what are you doing?" And that's why she doesn't get through to him, is because she's a little too naive. She can't really do it. Yoda's the one who finally sits down and is just like, "Okay, Luke, but let's get you the rest of the way along that path." I like looking at Leia and Holdo with Poe as less of a women telling men what to do and more of a, hey, look at these 2 different command styles. We've got one woman telling him what to do. She straight up slaps his face. She's not gentle about it. She slaps his face and demotes him and then gets taken out of play before she can finish instructing him. And we get someone who is abrasive, who is unpleasant, who is superior and withholding information, who simply because she doesn't like who he is and what he represents. You could almost take this as a criticism of, like, this peaceful, actual equality feminism and militant anti-male feminism, if you wanted to. Like, there's definitely room to go either way. And so, I'm like, the more I look at this, the more I'm like, it's there, sure, but I don't think it's as strong as people on either side of the aisle, because there are a lot of people, more left-wing, that are pointing at this and going like, see, this is why I like this, is because all this is in here, and I'm like, it's not so much that it's in here as it's open enough to interpretation for us to find it there, but you can interpret it other ways. Now, so I'm not going to say anyone's wrong for finding that there, but at the same time, I'm like, you know what? With a little effort, if you want to like Star Wars, if you're upset about not liking The Last Jedi, with a little effort, you could probably convince yourself that something else is going on here than you initially thought, and bam, you're fine. That's my advice, at least. That's what I've, and the more I watched it last night, and I was like, no, I feel like this is much more egalitarian than my original impressions were, is what I've come to over the years. That might just be me trying to justify my like of this movie, but hey. I don't know. You've heard of the literary criticism, like the death of the author technique. So this is basically that the author has no say in your interpretation of their work.
Yeah, we were talking about this at work the other day.
Yeah, so if it's like an author J.K. Rowling can't come along and say, hey, this is what I meant to do with the Harry Potter books. It's like, I mean, she can say that all she wants, but if you're doing the death of the author interpretation, you're going, no, independent of what she's saying, what am I actually getting out of this? What do I feel like is here? And I have no problem with that approach, in theory. Like, I've always had a knee-jerk reaction towards that, where I'm just like, no, this is what they're saying, so I am interested in what they're saying. Death of the author has never been my favorite approach, but it's particularly a problem for me. It's like, okay, if you want to do that, that's fine, but I get frustrated with people who are like, no, the author doesn't get to tell me what they were trying to say. I'm going to tell you what I'm getting out of this, which is largely influenced by what I'm putting into it as well.
Right.
It's extremely subjective, and then I'm going to hate you for whatever I've put here. And that's just an immature approach, first of all. But I'm just like, if you're going to decide what's in here, why not decide to find something you like? like death of the author is fine, but I kind of feel like people should try and trend to a more positive approach, where it's like, okay, if I'm finding nasty things here, I should step back and reconsider whether or not that was their intent. And if I'm finding good things I like, then cool, run with it. But like, we don't need more reason to dislike people.
Can I throw one more thing at you before
Please.
we go? So not with Holdo or anything like that, but one of the other messages, I guess, or things that maybe the audience is putting in there that may or may not have been intentionally in there by Rian Johnson's hand. The like pro-environment message or whatever when they free the Fathiers, right?
Sure.
So I was watching this scene in particular, I tried to pay attention more to the parts that I didn't like than the parts that I did, because I felt those needed more attention, you know? So I was watching this and I was just like, here comes her stupid line where she's like, you know, it was worth it, you know, or now it's worth it or whatever. And I started thinking about that. I'm like, well, what's worth it? What is the thing that makes, because Finn, right before she says that, he's like, you know, like kind of crashing through the city, like that felt good, you know, it made it all worth it. And then she takes the saddle off, the final one that they were riding, and, you know, slaps its behind, and off it goes, and she says, now it's worth it. And so I was like, what is the that was worth it that you were talking about? You came to this planet to find a code breaker. You didn't get a hold of the original code breaker. You've lost your backup code breaker at this point, because at this point DJ has not yet rescued them.
Yeah.
You've now stranded yourself on this planet. Your friends in the Resistance are now hung out to dry by you, because this was your last ditch plan to save things, was get the code breaker, get back to them. Your ship's destroyed. You're stuck on this planet. So that is what you are trading for the worth it of letting these animals go on a desert planet with a strictly controlled, habitable environment immediately surrounding the city, where they will be immediately captured again within, 72 hours at the outset? So, sacrificing your friends in the rebellion, completely abandoning your mission, leaving yourself to get totally captured, was worth it to free some animals temporarily. Wow.
Counterpoint. So, take that, narrow that in a bit. That ride on the Fathirs, the bat horses,
the space horses.
Yes,
yeah.
That was kind of a last-ditch approach in the first place. Like,
oh yeah.
And so I would take that line as specifically a response to what Finn just said. There is like, well, it was worth it to mess up this city, and she's like, no, that's not the point. The point is not tearing down. The point is not fighting what we hate. The point is helping. Like, it's worth it because we've let these go, not because, like, yeah, we're about to get cornered, we're about to get trapped, we failed. And he's saying, well, yeah, we failed, but at least we destroyed the city. And she's saying, no, at least we did something good for these Fathirs. Like, it's a recontextualizing of what he just said, where it's basically what's going to be echoed later when it's like, no, we're not fighting what we hate. Like, that's a necessity sometimes. That's like, but being motivated by hate, by anger, like that's basically where Poe was at the beginning, where he's like, no, it's worth it, whatever cost, to destroy them. There are costs that can be paid and can't be paid.
So it's just Rose being like aggressively optimistic,
kind of,
where it's like, sure, our friends might, they're going to die now because we totally completely failed in our mission, and we're going to die too.
Well, but that's literally this conversation. That is what's being said. Is he's saying like, yeah, we failed, we just failed. But at least we got to do this. And it's basically her saying, no, that's not the high point of this. This is the high point of this, is that at least we did some good for these. Yeah. However temporarily, sure.
But that stuck out to me differently this time, watching it. So I was like, I want to bring that up. Because I hadn't ever asked myself what specifically it was that was worth, setting some animals free. I was just like, that'll be an interesting linguistic little thing to examine and pull apart.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I had never thought of that. Yeah,
I hadn't considered that either. Yeah.
And with a lot of that is some politics that definitely a lot of people with the environmental, that a lot of people have some pretty severe reactions to anything that comes across as potentially critical of something that they're used to defending, like capitalism. So I think a lot of people look at Canto Bight and it's like, oh yeah, this is just being critical of capitalism and everything. It's like, no, at no point. This is specifically being critical of war profiteering, slavery, animal abuse, all of those. I think we can all agree those are bad things. But it's very easy to take that as a more of a knee-jerk. It's like, oh yeah, this is just leftists being critical of capitalism or whatever. It's like, capitalism has its flaws. It's okay to be critical of it. But I definitely share a lot of the knee-jerk reactions to just like, okay, no, I'm not anti-capitalist by any means. It's done a lot of good as well, and a lot of people dismiss that. But, and that's the thing with this, I had a similar thing with Knives Out. I've noticed some discussion online, without getting into spoilers, obviously, since that hasn't been out very long. And I loved that movie. I don't want to spoil it for people, but there is a point in that where, like, you've got this family, right? that's the focus of the whole movie, and they are. You've got some political divides in that family. Like, you've got some extreme right-wingers, you've got some extreme left-wingers, and they are constantly throwing just all the worst kind of internet troll crap at each other. And there is one scene in particular where they just are sitting there having a really nasty debate. Trump is never mentioned by name, but he's obviously a huge focus of their conversation. And there's this back and forth section, and it's been very fascinating to me to watch the reaction to that online and even in person in some cases, where I've seen a lot of right-wingers really upset about, oh yeah, this is Rian Johnson just being all anti-right-wing, blah, 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 blah. But I've also seen some left-wingers getting upset. It's just like, how could he be, like, anti-left-wing with this, and da-da-da-da-da. I read an entire article that was talking about, oh yeah, this is Rian Johnson sticking it to the alt-righters. And I'm like, you missed that entire conversation, didn't you? Like, the whole point of that, like, these left-wingers are just as bad. Like, he's highlighting how the main character in this movie is a Latina woman. We're never told exactly where she's from, because every time someone in the family mentions where she's from, they mention a different South American country.
That's great.
But and so this article I read was a guy like going like, oh yeah, see, like he's showing how these anti-immigrant right-wingers are just, they don't even know where she's from, they don't even see her as a person. And I'm like, dude, did you completely miss the fact that all the left-wing members of the family do that to her too? Like, the point of this is that both of these people, the people on both sides of this, are awful. And they're all being hypocrites in the exact same way to this woman. But there's so many people that watched that movie and just went, he's being anti-right-wing. Or, he's being anti-left-wing, depending on where their preferences are. There are people on both sides that all they got was that he was criticizing right-wingers. And just walked away from it. And I was like, no, that was actually a pretty balanced, like, everybody in that family is awful. And it doesn't matter which side of they're all being hypocrites in the exact same way, but people just missed it. I've been astounded at how many people I've seen just being like, this is Rian Johnson being anti-right-wing again, and I'm like, it wasn't though. It was like, he was anti that particular behavior on the right wing, but he did the same with the left. And I feel like a lot of stuff in The Last Jedi is like, yeah, if you want to take it that way, this could be construed as a criticism of capitalism or of anti-environmentalism and this, that, and the other. And a lot of people obviously have. But really, once you delve into it, like, he's not being anti-capitalist. He's anti-war profiteering, sure. But, it's like there isn't, as a middle-of-the-road, generally moderate person, I kind of feel like Rian Johnson is pretty middle-of-the-road moderate. Like, personally, obviously a lot of people, and the proliferation of how many women are instructing men or correcting men definitely does lend itself to some of that interpretation. I obviously had that initial knee-jerk reaction. So, I'm not saying it's not there. I'm just saying, hey, there's room here to reinterpret, and if you want to like this movie, if you want to not hate something Star Wars, then there's room there to reinterpret it. So, that's the politics. Ooh. Yay! So, that was the first of my 4 categories, but we've covered most of everything I had for politics, so we probably won't have to return to that one. Number 2 is the forest for the trees category. That's what I call it. So, a good example of this one is a discussion I had with a guy once, quite a while ago, where these are all writing complaints, generally. And one of his complaints about this movie is that it had no real 3-act structure. It didn't have a proper 3-act structure. And of course, I could have...
It clearly had that.
Yeah, see, and that's the thing, so I could have been like, okay...
Again, I didn't necessarily like what it did with its 3-act structure and the story it was telling the first, year.
Yep.
But you can't argue that it didn't have a 3-act structure. It very, very, very clearly did.
Yeah.
That's really surprising to me.
And I use that because it's a particularly egregious example like that we can agree. Yeah. We all know that 3-act structure is there if we stop and look. But he hadn't. He was complaining about that, and I could have, discussed a 3-act structure is not a requirement in storytelling. It's a useful tool, a useful schema to use. But I didn't need to, because the answer to that was, it does. And so I sat down and was just like, here's the 3-act structure, let me outline that for you. And then whenever and there are a lot of complaints like this where people are like, oh, this movie doesn't do this, and it doesn't do this, and it doesn't do this, and the response is just, yeah, it does. Here, let me outline it for you. And once I have, I usually get one of 2 responses. I either get the liar response, which is when people object, and it's just like, no, that doesn't count. It's like, well, why? Like, I just outlined it, so what about that was flawed? It doesn't count. No, that doesn't count. And they'll nitpick at some definition aspect or anything, or, you know, resort to ad hominem or some other fallacy, and just completely sidestep the issue. And we all know that the real reason is because it's devastating to my case. And so thankfully, more often than not, I get the second response, which is, how did I miss that? And the fact is, there's a lot of people who are just digging so particularly through this movie, so deeply looking for problems that they can't actually see what the movie is doing. They can't see the forest for the trees. And I run into a lot, which is not to say there aren't valid writing criticisms of this movie. There certainly are. And there are some that are just more wholly subjective, where it's like, well, I'm not going to say that you're wrong about that, but that's definitely not how I took what he was doing there. So, okay, I guess. But there are also a lot where people are just straight up like, this isn't doing this right. And it's like, well, yeah, it is here. So that's number 2. Number 3 is what I call the "so you don't like Star Wars" complaints.
Well, did you have any examples of number 2 coming from the responses?
We are gonna, I'm gonna delve into those once we've got what each of the categories, because some cross categories, so I want to have all the categories established so I can be like, yeah, this is partly this and partly this. So the "so you don't like Star Wars" complaints. These are complaints where, yes, it is a potential problem, but not with The Last Jedi. It's a problem with Star Wars in general. So this is people complaining about, that's scientifically implausible.
Oh, this is a good point, or a good point in time to bring this up. So, one of the complaints I see most often is like, oh, you know, Superman, Leia, Rey doing all these Force things, like all the problems, quote unquote.
Yes.
With new Force powers.
Yes. I wonder if you can bring this up.
I didn't do like a comprehensive, you know, like comprehensive list or anything, but I got into not an argument, but I was like, hold on Twitter like a week ago. I was like,
this was just after J.J. Abrams mentioned that there were going to be new Force powers in Rise of Skywalker, which would be divisive. Yeah. Which I was like, well, of course they are. They're new.
Yeah, and so I was like, as a reminder to all Star Wars fans, new Force powers being introduced in a movie is a thing that happens in every single Star Wars movie, and we've never had a problem with it until Episode 8.
It's amazing how many people forget that the Force could not be used to move things until Empire Strikes Back. Right. Like, that never happened in Episode 4. Yeah.
So
go ahead.
on Twitter, I had a rather lengthy thread just saying, look, this list is not comprehensive. I'm sure I've missed a couple of things. But just off the top of my head, here's what I can remember being introduced in which movie. And I went in release order. So Episode 4, the Force is basically just some vague guidance.
Yeah, and mind tricks.
And mind control and Force choking. That's what we get. That's all the Force is.
Yep. Which is an interesting thing, because nowadays I think people are like, oh yeah, Force choke, that's just manipulating objects with the Force, right? I always thought when I was young, I was like, it's a psychological thing. It's that this person feels like they are choking when they're not. And it's like, it could be interpreted either way, but it's like, I feel like a lot of people, after just watching Episode 4, were probably looking at it that way.
Episode 5, we get telekinesis. We see Vader chucking
objects. Which is a huge change in the Force.
That's a massive thing. And Force jumping.
Yes.
Luke is jumping around in the carbon freeze chamber.
Which is easy to miss. I didn't even notice this until I was in games later.
Higher and faster than normal. I noticed it as a kid because it makes a little whooshing sound at one point.
Yeah, I never even understood how he got out. Yeah. I was just confused. I was just like, how did he get up there?
Yeah. So that's new.
Yes.
Right there. First movie, and then Episode 6.
We also get to see some very specific Force visions in Episode 5.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I remember them later. Yes. So they're coming up. So like I said, this was just me
off the top
tweeting off the top of my head, going, okay, now what happens in 5? Okay, now what happens in 6? In Episode 6, we get Force lightning. Tell me that's not kicking the Force up a notch. You know, I mean, and as far as I know, nobody is really going, oh, well, the Emperor, I mean, Force lightning, jeez.
Oh, they're just trying to make this weak character more powerful at the last minute.
Everybody is going, holy crap, Force lightning, did you see that? That was so cool, you know? Like, sucks to be Luke, I wouldn't want to be him, but dang, that was cool, you know? Episode 1, I was having trouble coming up with a new Force power. I said maybe nothing new, but everything from the original trilogy shows up minus lightning. And then I did remember some stuff. We see, like, the only way I can think to put it is in D&D terms, featherfall. When they're sneaking around the ship at the beginning,
they
jump like 60 feet without shattering every bone in their body. And they fall quickly, so clearly it's the last few seconds where they're like, and force slow, or whatever, so jumping from great heights safely, force jumping, force falling safely, force feather fall, right?
I like it. Force feather fall.
Episode 2, we see force lightning deflection. Who knew that was a thing?
And absorption. Yep.
Not absorption.
Yeah, no,
Yes,
Yoda absorbs
it.
it.
He does.
Yoda catches it, throws it back, and then Dooku tries again, and Yoda absorbs it.
Okay. Yeah, I remembered the deflection. I remember. I put it in 3.
Which was awesome.
Yeah, and so and here's where I remember. I said I forgot to. I forgot about Force visions, which are alluded to in Episode 1 and 2, but they're first seen in Episode 5.
Yes.
Then Episode 3, we get Force sensitivity. I don't know what to call it, but Yoda and Obi-Wan in Episode 4 both feel the mass taking of life from great distances away.
Yeah. We also learned that apparently becoming a Force ghost is a learned skill.
Yeah. Force lightning
known before.
absorption. I had it in Episode 3, but I guess it was Episode 2. I was just misremembering. Like I said,
he does
it again in 3.
Yeah.
Dark side Force eye changing. Apparently that's a thing.
Yeah.
The dark side can change the color of your eyes temporarily.
Episode 7 gives us Force mind reading, which we've not seen before.
Which is definitely a step up, but still in line
and
with what
we
we've
get,
seen.
I forgot in Episode 1, we see Force speed used for the first time and then never again.
Yes.
And then in Episode 7, we see Force anesthesia when Kylo knocks Rey out with his mind.
Oh, you know what? We see that in Episode 1 probably.
Where?
When they're on the bongo and Jar Jar starts freaking out.
Yeah, and he tells him to
Qui-Gon
calm
reaches
down.
forward and grabs his shoulder, and then he passes out. Jar Jar
He's like,
passes
you
out for a
overdid it.
second.
Pass out?
Well, yeah, he's unconscious.
He is
he's
unconscious
out.
for.
Oh, I didn't know.
And that's
few
definitely
seconds.
the way it was portrayed is basically like he's telling him to do something. He's giving him a command, and then Obi-Wan's like, "Yeah, you overdid it." He's told him to calm down, and he just went straight to passing out. But yeah, we have seen the Force used to put someone out before.
So
That's I forgot about that.
Good
catch, Ross.
we're of course doing the marathon to get ready for Rise of Skywalker.
Sure,
I just
sure.
noticed it this last time. But
okay, so that appears in Episode 1 for the first time, but sort of a blink and you miss it kind of
Which
thing.
I would say that's an
But
extension of the
episode-
Jedi mind trick. If
Yeah.
that's what he was doing.
But Episode 7, I mean, I didn't know what to call it other than Force anesthesia, where it's just
Force
like, and
knockout.
you're done.
the counterpoint
Force
though,
knockout
is
is
maybe
what Daisy Ridley is.
Yeah, hey.
either that or Gungans
She
are
really
just like
is. She's
goats.
so cute.
Either that or Gungans are like goats, and just when they panic too much, they just pass out. So
I want
one of the two.
I want a 10-hour YouTube compilation of screaming Gungans. Just
are people screaming at Gungans and having them fall over? Yeah.
it's so great.
Fainting Gungans. Yeah.
Little known trick, how to defeat a Gungan army en masse. You just
Surprise them.
Doing a real loud
Exactly.
noise.
Yep. That's why the Gungans had to get to the battlefield first, so they weren't taken by surprise.
There you go. Yeah. It all makes sense.
Little known fact too, that shield actually blocked out loud sounds, and mitigated them, so they
Yeah,
couldn't
there
be
you go.
startled.
Yeah. See, it all makes sense.
All those dead Gungans weren't actually dead.
Yeah, they were just knocked
They were just,
out. There you go.
passing out.
That's
Yeah.
But anyway, regardless, Episode 7 gives us Force mind reading.
Mm-hmm.
Episode 8 gives us Force flight from Leia. And again, I'm just making these names up, which is really, I think, just relative telekinesis.
Yeah.
Since
Yes.
Leia's
Yeah.
pulling on the Raddus, which is an amazingly huge ship, and her relatively small size moves her, not the ship. Right?
Yep.
We also
We do, to be fair, see Luke hover on more than one occasion.
Yes.
We see him at the end when he's projecting
there's force
himself.
levitation.
He's levitating, and then when Rey pulls the lightsaber out in there, brings
Yeah,
the
that's
lightsaber
right.
to a stick fight, and he
Yes.
falls down. He does not hit the stairs until he's assured himself that she is actually not going to attack him with that
Yeah.
lightsaber.
Yeah.
But he just stops in midair.
And
which I'm
then
like,
we
"Man."
also get linked Force visions from Snoke, which is not
Yes.
a thing we've seen happen
Force
before.
projection is
And then, Force projection as well. Let's see. So I said the conclusion of this Twitter thread was really introducing more Force powers is nothing new and has been a thing since Obi-Wan's Force ghost appeared to Luke on Hoth in 1981. because that's another one.
Yeah.
That apparently you can be a ghost, a Force ghost.
And heck, arguably, even Chirrut introduced new stuff like walking across the beach there. That's not what we've seen the Force do before. We've seen it guide our actions. We've never seen it alter stuff around us of its own accord in order to preserve us.
True.
Like, that's not a thing that's happened.
And this doesn't count anything that we've seen in Clone Wars, like Quinlan Voss's ability to like touch an object and see that object's history.
Yep.
Which everybody's fine with.
Actually, that was another one that also had a precedent. I think that might be what's happening with Rey, because that came up to other like episode 9 theories.
Sure. And I was thinking about that while I was watching Force Awakens yesterday. I thought, oh, this is similar to Qui-Gon's.
And for those that are just like, no, that wasn't a thing. I think it was started off as like Quinlan's, where she touches the lightsaber, but then it prompts her own vision.
Right, and that's what makes me think that it's a separate Force ability.
Yeah,
almost like that. Maybe hers is like the upgraded version on the skill tree. You know what I mean? Like it's further down the skill tree. You know.
And so the point here, though, is that these are things that this is something Star Wars has always done.
Adding new Force abilities and stuff, that's been around since literally movie 2.
Yeah.
And nobody's had a problem with it till just now, so calm down. Yeah. It's like, it's
now,
okay.
To be fair, I can understand as a concern of like, well, if we keep adding powers to the Force, it's going to get OP, and it's going to be a problem in universe, which is exactly what happened with the extended universe. But most people who are bringing that up aren't actually saying that. They're just being like, oh, they're just Mary Sueing these characters or other, which complaints about Rey as a Mary Sue is another one of these. Which we discussed in the Mary Sue episode, where it's just like,
that's a great episode.
Especially now that I've started watching Rebels, and I'm just like, okay, I'm sorry. If you've complained to me about Rey being a Mary Sue, and you're just fine and dandy with Ezra Bridger, you can just, go sit in the corner and think about what you've said. Because that's just ridiculous. And I love Ezra. I've enjoyed it, but science complaints, improbability complaints, we've pretty thoroughly addressed that Star Wars has always been very, very improbable. And the main point of this is, like, it's like I said, it's not that this isn't a potential problem, but if it didn't bother you in other movies, it's probably not actually that really big of a problem here. Like, it's hard to say that a series continuing to do something it's always done is a flaw. You know?
Well, and what's so funny, too, is the rank hypocrisy. Like, this series is doing what it's always done since episode 5 in 1981, and I'm mad about it now. You know, and especially when you're like, but episode 5, which did this thing that I'm complaining about first, love it. It's the best movie. It's my favorite.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it's doing what you're doing. Yeah, but I'm angry now. You know.
See, and both so you don't like Star Wars and Force for the Tree's complaints, they kind of point to there being some deeper, more bothersome issue. Like, it's like I always say, there's a lot of problems with Rogue One that I'm like, this is a nitpick. This isn't something that would bother me if there weren't other deeper things that have upset me. But since I'm already nitpicking, hey, why not? You know, it's like a lot of the things that it does are things that I can recognize in other movies as like, well, for instance, actually, one of the more valid complaints I've seen that I've been forced to be like, well, you know, you got me there. That is definitely, someone linked me to a video that had just come out of, it was a guy talking about swordplay and deconstructing the problems with the lightsaber duel in the throne room in episode 8. And some of what he was saying was very much like, this is overly prescriptive, like, this is what I like. There's no reason that has to be part of it. And also, it was some Force for the Trees, where it's like, you're complaining that it didn't do this, but it totally did. Just not to the extent you wanted, maybe, but he also referenced some other videos that I had seen of like actual stuntmen deconstructing the problems with that fight, and it's like, yeah, you've got stuntmen you've got the Power Rangers dodging in front of the camera and blocking important, your view of what is actually happening in the fight. You've got stuntmen just kind of standing around waiting for their moment to be tossed around by the main characters. Yeah. I had noticed, rewatching that fight scene on YouTube a couple months back, I noticed that there are times where we cut from one view of the fight to another view of the fight, and characters will have shifted where they were, and then we'll cut back to the original view and they'll be back. So it's not entirely like, there are a lot of problems with the action from a choreography and perspective. Excuse me. But that's not the sort of thing that usually bothers me. Like, I can handle messy choreography.
Like like the Power Ranger who goes to hit Rey, and she was clearly supposed to have ducked, so he, for no reason whatsoever, angles his blade up so
Absolutely.
that he doesn't smack her in the back of the head.
And isn't there one that he goes for a block, but that there's never an attack coming, it seems like, on one of the Praetorian Guards?
I don't know.
Maybe.
I wouldn't
be surprised. It is pretty messy once you really get down to picking it apart.
But I also wanted to add to this, there's actually a reason why there's a lot of this Power Rangering with it. You remember the first Transformers movie?
Yes.
Very
Sadly.
vaguely.
Okay. So, one thing that movie did better than the others are really cool transformations of the Transformers. They would actually sit and watch, and you'd wait and have this really long, elaborate transformation
I remember those,
of a Transformer doing its thing. Well, one thing that no one ever really notices is that there's no actual transforming going on. It's just a mass of swirling parts that you'll occasionally see a connection here and there.
Yeah.
And then you just end up in the final form.
Yeah.
This is the same sort of thing. It's just causing a lot of visual noise where you're forced to focus on Rey and Kylo. They're right on those thirds, that golden third on either side of center.
Yeah. There is a lot of good framing going on as well. Yeah.
Yes.
But,
Well, but again, all the Praetorian Guards are doing is just adding that visual noise to block out stunts to give it a cool effect.
yeah.
So,
but once you start paying attention, which, I'm hardly going to fault people for.
yeah.
It
does break down.
Especially
yeah,
for people to whom choreography is important. Like, that I get that. My main thing with a fight is usually, well, is this serving the story in some way, which that one actually does very well at. But, I can nitpick the choreography in the same way I nitpick the choreography in Rogue One. It's just that it bothers me. It is a light thing in both of them. Like, this doesn't ruin my enjoyment of The Last Jedi by any means, and that's not the main problem in Rogue One for me. There's deeper things. And so you get a lot of these Forest for the Trees and you don't like Star Wars complaints point towards there's something deeper here. If it didn't bother you in other movies, it wouldn't be bothering you here if there weren't something else. And so for some people, it is the politics. That is the big thing. For some people, it's just some other issue, which I've got a couple that we'll get into in a bit. But then for some people, it's the next category, the fourth category, which I've titled, That's Not What I Wanted.
The big one.
Yes, it is a big one. And this one has the most crossover with the other categories as well. I took a quote from a retweet that Ross gave us on Twitter. Maybe where we get hung up is by going into a movie with a list of demands rather than a sense of discovery. Yep. Which I thought was nice.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's like when I was re-listening to our first Last Jedi episode, I noticed that we'd kind of boil down to that at times where it's like, okay, well, Kyler didn't like this, and Ross and I would be like, well, but this is why that kind of does work, and then your response would be like, well, but they could have done it differently. It's like, well, yeah, but if it's doing what it's supposed to, why does it need to be different? It's mainly because that's not what you wanted. And that's a tricky thing. Like, movies can set up expectations in various ways. You can have hope, especially for a long-running property like this that we've all sunk so much time and imagination into. Yeah, there's going to be hopes and dreams and expectations, and it's a really hard thing to get around. I don't blame anyone for being like, well, I wanted this, but I didn't get it. I got a list here of things I was like, why does this happen? One is different expectations and hopes. We all started with the original Star Wars. We all liked it. But over the years, we've developed more particular preferences. We've all gone in different directions. We all love the originals, but a lot of us unconsciously or even consciously want the new Star Wars to become more what we've grown into over time. Some people want it to be more literary, more highfalutin, more high-minded.
It's true. I see that even in the Star Wars games that I play, like Armada and Legion.
Yeah.
Particularly Armada, because they're just about out of ships to do for the Empire and Rebels at this point.
Yeah.
And we don't get Clone Wars till next Christmas. And so it's really funny getting on the forums, because every so often, every month and a half or so, I'll see a new thread start, and it's exactly like the other threads that start every month and a half. What new ships do you want to see?
Yeah.
What do you hope that FFG will make? And inevitably, it's about every other comment goes like this. Well, we're just about done. So, I mean, there's like this ship, and there's this ship, and there's this ship that's left that we've seen on screen. But really, we're just about done with this era, so I'm looking forward to Clone Wars.
Yeah.
And then the response to every single one of those comments, so it's about 50-50, is, oh no, but there's so much good EU stuff. They could have this ship, And, Star Wars fans would love to see this ship in there. And I'm going, I know what ship you're talking about, and I think that ship is super fugly. And I wouldn't want to see that ever in 100 million years on an Armada table, because that ship is so gross, it's like visual vomit. They took a shoebox and put some greebles on it and called it a ship. It's terrible. No.
Yeah.
Like the Assault Frigate Mark 1 is what I'm thinking of. I'm just like, no. That ship is terrible. It is so ugly. What, the original dreadnoughts of the Katana fleet. They've got it looks like something that is just ugly.
It looks phallic.
Yes.
There you go.
It's a greebly phallus, yes. And I'm just going, really? I know that those of you that read the original Thrawn trilogy, like, you're in love with this. It's the Katana fleet and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, I think I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
Now that you mention it. Yeah.
And it does.
Yes.
Well, and that's the funny thing about that one is the designs of those ships were heavily influenced by everything that Star Wars was trying to avoid.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
By all the 2001 A Space Odyssey, the stuff that was popular at the time.
And so they're sitting here going, oh man, all Star Wars fans would love these ships. And I'm going, well, I consider myself to be a little bit of a Star Wars fan.
Kinda, yeah.
And I don't ever want to see that ship on my table ever.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, sure, some of you will, and some of them are like, oh yeah, give us the Yuuzhan Vong as a third faction, like, that would be so cool, like, they'd make so much money, and I'm like, whoa, those ships would be so ugly. It would hurt.
It would be hard to make.
But also, there's a sizable portion of the fandom, like me, who go, no, Yuuzhan Vong is one of the dumbest ideas ever, just no, stop it.
Yeah.
Nope.
We were discussing this before you got here. It's just like where I'm just like, the Yuuzhan Vong it was a dicey choice at best, and it doesn't feel very Star Wars.
Again, like a lot of things in Star Wars, at its core, there's a nugget of an interesting idea.
Yeah,
and it just, like so many things in the Star Wars EU, goes horribly awry. To put it nicely, it's just terrible. And so I think there is a lot of that, of where it's like, well, of course Star Wars fans would want A and B.
Yeah.
And then you get C and D, and it's like, wow, I'm incensed and outraged.
Exactly.
And I'm not saying that I am free of this, because...
Oh, no, everyone does it, yeah.
I've been there myself, and I begrudgingly admit that a lot of Last Jedi was me going, okay, well, these trailers don't have me super impressed. I hope that something good happens. And then what happens isn't what I hoped for.
Yeah.
Not that I necessarily was like, well, you need to check off this list of things, because I didn't have a list of things that I wanted to see happen.
Yeah.
But I mean, aside from the general things that I want to see happen, like I want to see a space battle in every Star Wars movie because it's cool.
Yeah,
I want to see a lightsaber battle because they're cool.
I had that in my outline as an example of this. Is that Kylo wants space battles? That's not a bad thing at all.
Yeah, and how you go about that space battle, okay. And I enjoy for the most part the first, and actually let me give my new and updated opinion on the space battle. I don't hate it as much as I did at first, and I will also say this about Poe. Rewatching Force Awakens, I love the line where he's like, so who talks first? Do I talk first? Do you talk first? And I'm like,
I also
dang it. But that is Tony Stark, and it does make the Yo Mama joke more in character than I think about it. I still don't like it. I still think it's crossed the line a little bit too far. But I'm like, that isn't as out of character as...
And who knows, in another year?
Maybe.
2 more years, Kyler could be making Yo Mama jokes himself.
Right.
I still think...
and maybe he'll be pushing for That's What She Said in Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, please no, JJ.
Oh, man. There was...
Yeah. The breadth of people who like Star Wars, like there's so many people that of course there's just going to be a huge variety of opinion. So a lot of people just want it to veer into hard science fiction, even though that's not at all what it's ever been or should be.
Yeah.
A lot of people want dark and gritty. A lot of people want, like, Mandalorian has actually been very eye-opening for me. What startled me most is just like one of my basic, like, I want as original a story as possible. Like, obviously there's going to be, that's a
They've
difficult
almost the
thing
most
to do.
original story. None.
Exactly. Well, and that's what there is heavily derivative.
Yeah.
And that obviously, like, if you had asked me, like, after Rogue One, I was like, yeah, part of why Rogue One works for a lot of people is because it is so straightforwardly cliche that people know what to fill in the gaps that the writers left. Like, they didn't finish it. They got a lot of problems, but people know what was supposed to be there because they're familiar with the story. So they just fill that in and keep going. But after watching Mandalorian, I'm starting to realize, like, it's not just we're comfortable with this, it's okay. It's an active desire from a sizable portion of the Star Wars fandom that's exactly what they want, is derivative, familiar, even cliche.
Like episode 4, where I'm going, am I watching Clone Wars or am I watching Mandalorian?
Yeah. And so...
Because Filoni already did this episode in the Clone Wars.
Exactly. And I'm like, that's not a bad thing per se, but it has definitely been, it was, especially after those first 2 episodes, was a major adjustment that I had to make, was to sit down and this is the usual, I feel like, best response to, okay, it didn't meet my expectations, but is it doing what it set out to do well? And for those first 2 episodes of Mandalorian, I was like, yes, it is. It is very derivative, but it is competently so. And it's like, I like the Paul Hollywood analogy, Great British Bake Off. It's like, if you're going to do something simple, then it has to be perfect, because I know exactly what that's supposed to be. So you need to tick off every box just right. You need to, you're not trying as many things, so I expect you to do everything cleaner, perfect, spit shine, polish. And the first 2 episodes, I was like, it's not a spit shine, but it's shiny. It's good. We're good. And then my problems with 3rd, 4th, 5th, so on. I still haven't seen the 6th one yet. I have recording. Is just that it's been increasingly rickety in its structure and a lot of its stuff. But it's like, but at first it was this definite adjustment of, okay, is it doing what it set out to do? I feel like it is. They clearly deliberately set out to make it this way, and they're doing that. So cool. It took me some time to adjust to, but I got there. Brave is another example that I had of that, where it's like, I watched the trailers for Brave, Pixar's Brave, and I was like, oh, this is going to be like a high epic fantasy from Pixar. That's going to be awesome. And then I watched it and was like, oh, this is like Freaky Friday with bears in medieval Scotland. That's weird. And it took me quite a while before I could step back and go, okay, but did they do Freaky Friday with bears in medieval Scotland well? Like, did they achieve their goals? Yeah, they did. It is a well-made movie. It just was very jarring for me for a very long time that this is not what I had thought I was getting and or wanted from that movie. Another reason this happens with the not what I wanted is rose-colored glasses. I have that all in capital letters. Rose-colored glasses!
Rose Tico-colored glasses?
Yes. If only. Nothing can live up to our expectations, It's like a lot of people are just like, oh, I just want what the original did, but you've inflated what the original did to such a degree that nothing's ever going to live up to that. Also, we gloss over flaws, misrepresent what the originals even were. So even when we say we want the new movies to be just like the old ones, we can't even agree on what that means, because we've all got different ideas of what the originals were. And so even that, whereas like I've seen so many people being like, oh yeah, Mandalorian is classic Star Wars, and I'm sitting here like, I mean, in some ways, sure, but in other ways, it's like George would never have gone for anything this baldly derivative. Like that's not George's style. But for a lot of people, it's like, no, what's the point? He was making it derivative. It's like, no, he was trying to get that archetypal journey. He wasn't trying to be derivative per se. And there's obviously a rousing debate to be had on that topic that we're not going to do right now. But suffice it to say, a lot of people don't agree on what the old movies were, so it's really hard to agree on whether or not this is what the old movies were. And my third reason here is that Star Wars is heavily formulaic, even at its best. And that's not bad, but I think a lot of people get so hung up on what the formula is supposed to be because they know these formulas backwards and forwards that they can't accept anything else, even if it logically does fit with what came before. Like, yeah, it's like, this is what the setup was, and we split off to the left instead of going right like the formula normally does. And yes, this does make sense with that formula if you actually stop and go, oh, well, yeah, from that jumping point you could land there. But we know it's supposed to go right, and I feel like a lot of people get so hung up on what it's supposed to. That's what causes their forest for the trees. Is, it's like, I'm so hung up on what this is supposed to be that I can't see that what it is actually functioning quite well. So, And yeah, a lot of crossover between this category and the others. One example I've seen is I watched a video by Space Doc on YouTube, is kind of a podcast / YouTube video thing. And he had a video I watched that was titled it's something like The Proper Way to Subvert Expectations. And it had, when I moused over it, one of the thumbnails that popped up was a Snoke image. And I was like, oh, okay, well, all right. Hit me with what you got. Tell me what this did wrong then. And then as I got listening to it, it was kind of what I wanted thing, because what he was saying was very subjective of just like, oh, this is what I like in subverting expectations. It wasn't this is how to, the only way to do it or the proper way to do it. It's just, this is how I like it. And he never really delved into what The Last Jedi did wrong in his opinion. So I was like, I can't gauge what your problem is here. But it was interesting because as I was watching the video and I was like, oh, okay, this is what you like in subverting expectations, I assumed that this was going to be a critique of The Last Jedi, but it looks like it's going to be an endorsement of The Last Jedi. Because The Last Jedi literally did exactly what you're outlining here. And then I got to the end of the video and he's like, so anyway, that's why The Last Jedi was bad. And I was like, wait, what? What? But it literally, so it was a simultaneous forest for the trees where it's like, can't you see that it is literally doing what you outlined? And a not what I wanted sort of thing where it's like, that's not the only way to subvert expectations and have it work. That's just your favorite way. And the fact that this, like, even if this hadn't been that, it could still have been valid, but it literally was exactly what you outlined here. So my sister had another one of those where she watched, it was like The Proper Way to Make a Sequel or something. And it was focusing on Trek 2 and a couple others, and she was watching it, and she's like, yeah, see, this is what makes The Last Jedi so great. And then he got to the end and was just offhandedly at the end was like, and that's why Last Jedi doesn't work. And she was like, what? What is this? That happens a lot. So, I got some mini categories as well of stuff I ran into. There's a lot of stuff that's very subjective, like to the point where it's like, well, I'm not going to say that that's wrong per se. Like, okay, I didn't interpret it that way. Like humor is one of these where it's like, that's very... or things that are just blatant misreadings of what's going on here, where it's like either you haven't watched this in a while and you don't even remember what was on screen, or you're just interpreting that in a way that no reasonable person ever should. One example of this, I started watching a video on YouTube that I was like, okay, I've seen a couple things from this channel in my suggestions, and this looks like a fairly innocuous one, like, before I jump straight into criticisms of The Last Jedi, let's see what he says about how Disney does lightsabers wrong, was what the video was. And I was like, okay, sure, hit me with this. I've heard people complain about this before. I don't really agree with it, but let's see what you got. And then he spent the first 3 minutes of this video just I'm not going to use that word, whining about Luke's line of... You think I'm going to go out there with a laser sword and face down the entire First Order or whatever? And he was just ranting about how Luke knows that this is called a lightsaber. Why would he call this a laser sword when he knows that it's
sarcastic and condescending?
And at first I was just like, oh, okay, well, you obviously just read that wrong, but whatever. But he literally spent 3 minutes of this video just ranting about that, and then finally I was just like, well, you're an idiot. Turning that off. I'm not going to put up with 15 minutes of this video if you can't even grasp.
That's impressive that they missed that. I mean, I think that is pretty obvious what the movie is doing right there, where Luke is like, no, you're naive and don't know what you're doing, so let me talk down to your level, little girl.
It's like,
you want me to take my laser sword and go, like... He thinks Rey's an idiot, and he's treating her like one.
Mm-hmm. And he's being dismissive of what she's like. You're naive. Like, you can stop it.
Yeah, I thought that was like 110% blatant.
That's why I put it in this category. Or you also have similar things with people who complain. We've brought this up before, but people who complained about the kid at the end was like, well, what? So what? Now this entire series is just going to be about him? And it's like, have you watched a movie? Do you know how movies work? Like, that's not how they work. So we didn't get really a lot. We didn't get, I don't think, anything that was like
and
that
again,
blatant
of
on things, but there are somewhere.
Here last night, knowing that this kid is coming, even looking at that, I had the thought to myself, I'm like, that is shocking to me that people would think that this next movie is going to be all about him or something. It's clearly just, this kid is just a stand-in for us as the audience of like, hey, there's still hope in the galaxy. Like, the Jedi will rise again.
Exactly.
And I'm like, that's...
Well, and specifically, that is what Luke did here. Like,
well, yeah, but like, and probably we won't ever see that kid again. Like, realistically.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Maybe.
It's Star Wars. The's going to be some
sure.
spin-off at some point.
But not in 9. That kid's going to be nowhere in 9. And I'm just like, this. It's just an allegory for the audience, and that we as an audience can have hope. There's hope been restored to the galaxy. It's not over.
Yep.
That's literally this kid's entire purpose in life. Is to be that. Yeah.
So you get, and most of the ones I got weren't that sort, but there were some where I was like, I had one complaint that was just like, well, if the plan was to lightspeed into the supremacy from the start, then why didn't she just do it at the start before she lost the ships? And it's like, well, that was pretty clearly a last minute decision that she made. I feel like that was pretty clear.
Yeah.
Now, you could debate about whether or not that should have been an earlier decision. Sure, fine, whatever. But your assumption that it wasn't is erroneous. So we got some of that. So we can skip over my politics here because we covered that. So, forest for the trees. I've got some... I had one... And I apologize that for the most part, I'm not going to read the full things that everyone said. I'm just going to sum them up. So I apologize if I misrepresent what you were going for. But
if Chris does, emails, let us know.
Yes,
do
please.
Another Last Jedi episode.
Or just, come talk to me because a good chunk of the ones
Last Jedi 3, even last year.
The people who gave me the longest, most thorough responses were people that I know and I'm going to see again. So we'll chat if they even listen to this. But so this was one that I've complained about the entire trilogy, not with the pair of movies that we have so far, but extended into Last Jedi, is that the Force Awakens reset our main characters. It's like Leia she's back instead of any development or change. She's just back heading the Resistance and another rebellion. Han is off being a smuggler again. Luke is off by himself, not part of the action again.
Han is off being a deadbeat dad, you mean?
See, and I was like, okay, that's a way to interpret this. And that's why I put it in Forest for the Trees, is I'm like, I feel like, first of all, it's like, my complaints about when people, are like comparing Harry Potter and Star Wars, and they're just like, oh yeah, the hairy friend, that's Chewie and Hagrid, as though these people occupy anything even remotely close to the same area.
I was just going to say something.
And that's very much a very forced comparison. Yeah. And I'm like, trying to suggest that because Luke is out over on a planet all by himself, he has reset to where he was in this trilogy, is just utterly absurd. Like, dude, where was that coming from?
Because Farm Boy Luke was clearly a crotchety old man like his adopted or his uncle, and is,
it's like Luke is very much not reset. He is in a very new place for Luke. Han and Leia is addressed in Force Awakens, where she says like, they got hit with a trauma and they went back to what they knew best. I can understand if that's not enough explanation for you, but it was for me. I'm like, okay, I get that. And that's actually why I really appreciate that line. I always remember it because I remember having a bit of this where I'm just like, wait, so Han is just off smuggling again? What? But then I got that line and I was like, oh, okay, that's why. Sure. That makes perfect sense. That's something people do. That's for sure a psychological. That's what people deal with trauma, deal with difficulties by reverting back to old habits.
Yeah.
So that made sense to me.
Wait a minute. We can get Carrie up here. Carrie! For real, Carrie, come here for a second.
Oh, I was just going to... And now a word from our special impromptu guest.
Yeah, my wife, who is a therapist and would know about this topic. So we're just talking about inconsistencies with The Last Jedi, right?
And that's why she knows about it, because...
Yeah. And specifically about Han and Leia breaking up and reverting back to old habits as the result of grief. Is there real life precedent for that? Is that a thing people do?
Plausible.
Into the mic.
Yeah, into the mic.
It's possible. Think people do weird things with grief. It's not necessary that they go back to old habits.
Yeah, it's not a given that people would automatically do that, but it is a plausible extrapolation from what someone could do in that situation.
Yes. What old habits are they going back to?
Just that, after the whole kerfuffle with Ben, killing a bunch of people and, wrecking the whole Jedi Order and Luke and everything like that, Han, I believe, is the one that says, we both went back to the only things we were ever good at. Han being a smuggler with Chewie and Leia leading people, and that.
Is that a realistic reaction to grief?
It's possible. Again, everyone reacts to grief differently, so some people are going to find new ways to
destroy themselves.
I was gonna say be sad, but
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, Han could have
Destroying
turned
themselves
to...
might be their way of dealing, but
Han could have turned to death sticks, and it would have been a
Yeah.
totally different movie.
But
nobody
they
would have been
also-
upset about that.
Yeah.
And they also can go back to old habits.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
Cool. Thank you, love.
You all missed the adorable kiss that Carrie just gave Ross on the cheek.
Yeah. My wife's the best.
Well, I mean, I have strong opinions about my wife's bestness, but,
I will argue with you. That is the hill I choose to die on.
Yeah, me too. So let's just keep our own hills and not fight. All right. So this is a big one that a lot of people discuss in various ways, the subverting of expectations. In this, I addressed that one video, but I didn't get into the specifics of what. But basically, the complaints that I got from a couple people here were that subverting expectations, it renders what happened moot. Like, it doesn't matter now. Snoke is irrelevant. He died, and all the setup is gone. Like, he didn't matter. Finn and Rose went on this big side adventure, and then it didn't do anything, and there was no point to all of that after all. A lot of complaints of that sort of thing. And so I have a couple things here where I was like, first, in a series as formulaic as Star Wars, subverting the formula is, in my opinion, a valid goal in and of itself. Like, normally, I would be like, okay, if you're going to subvert a trope or something, you need to do it with a purpose. You have to have a reason behind it. I would say that Star Wars is formulaic enough that subverting an expectation, subverting the trope, is a valid goal in and of itself to a certain degree. But since everything in here was done with a purpose, that's kind of redundant. So here, let me render my first point moot with this plot twist. Seriously, failing is not the same as irrelevance. Like that. There's particularly with the Finn and Rose bit where it's I had one or two people that are just like, oh, that was all pointless. There's no point to all of it. It's similar to what we had the discussion about Canto Bight in the last one, where
I think I said that in the Last Jedi episode.
You both did. And the thing for me is I'm just like, especially because one or two of these are people that should know better. Failing is not the same as irrelevant. Like, what makes a scene or something irrelevant to the story is if it has no impact on character, on plot, or anything like that. So, for instance, sorry to beat this dead horse, but Edao in Rogue One. Before they go to Edao, Jyn is now officially, she's on board with what we're doing. She wants to save her father. She wants to destroy the Death Star. She's on board. She has officially crossed over from being I'm not part of this to I am part of this. And Cassian he believes her about what she said is going on, but he's worried that the rest of the rebellion won't believe her without some sort of proof. And then they go to Edao, and a bunch of stuff happens, but none of it matters. Like, nothing changes on Edao. People might point, it's like, oh, well, they killed Mads Mikkelsen. And I'm like, no, that doesn't matter. He was not involved in the plot in any way. He set the plot in motion and has not been relevant since, and his death has no impact on the story. Now, then someone might point out, it's like, oh, well, but it matters to Jyn. Like, this is a character moment for her. It's true. They get on the ship, they're fleeing Edao, and she is upset. She is pissed at Cassian, and she is pissed at the rebellion because they just caused the death of her father. And that's a significant change from where she was at the beginning of this sequence. And then in literally the very next scene, without even a break to see what the baddies are up to in between, she is hopefully trying to get the rebellion to go help her with destroying the Death Star. Like, she's just A-okay with the rebellion again. When she sees Cassian next, she has a moment of like, I'm not happy with you on her face. And then but it doesn't get brought up. She's not mad at him for killing her dad anymore. They're just on board, like, we're gonna go. I'm not used to people sticking around. And it's like, wait, what? You were just mad at him. You were just mad at him for killing your father, and now it's just not brought up. It's just gone. Similar with Cassian, where it's like Cassian is like, oh yeah, Cassian made a choice here to not kill her dad. And it's like, yeah. And then she was mad at him for it anyway. And his father, her father still died. She still blamed Cassian for it, so he might as well have just done it. Like, it has no impact on anything. But then again, all of that gets tossed out, and it's just ignored that any of it happened in the next scene. So that's a scene that, like, it's a sequence of scenes that has no impact on the story. If you actually took it out, it would make more sense. She would be more consistent, he would be more consistent, and the story would just move on. That is a scene that has no impact. At Canto Bight, as I mentioned in the last one, is Finn's entire character arc. Finn changes drastically over the course of all that. Poe changes because of his failure there. Like, it has drastic impacts on both the plot and on the characters. And character changing means that even if it hadn't changed the plot, you can't remove this without it affecting things because people have changed because of this. The story wouldn't make sense otherwise. And to say that failing it makes things irrelevant is odd, to say the least. And Snoke in particular. So I can see a little more subjectivity on this. Like one of the lines that someone said is that the last movie told us to be excited for Snoke as a big bad, and then this movie just went, nope, never mind. So, I'm obviously quite sensitive about whether or not a movie, like saying that this movie told us something, like that is a way you can interpret this. And I'm very sensitive to people putting their own expectations, but I'll just go with a straight up, like, sure, that is, those were the familiar formulas, those are the hints, those are what we were getting from The Force Awakens, and that is not where The Last Jedi went with him. I've got a couple responses to that, though, where I'm like, having Snoke die and Kylo Ren step up as our actual main villain is a more interesting development to me than just another big bad.
Yeah.
Like, he was basically just another emperor, and and people were they were waiting to see, well, how's he going to differentiate himself from the emperor? Mm-hmm. But give me an answer that isn't just Emperor 2.0. Like, most people,
But he's not garbed in black, he's gold.
He raided Elton John's closet.
And he looks fabulous. But, well, to be fair, he's significantly taller than Elton John.
One thing that I noticed in this rewatch totally makes no bearing on anything. Totally, literally irrelevant. But when Hux comes in after the big fight and Kylo's unconscious on the floor and everything's all burny, whatever, and Snoke's legs fall off the thing. Mm-hmm. He's literally just in flip-flops.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, little slippers.
I had never noticed that before, and I'm like, he's wearing flip-flops. Like, I think I have that pair. Wow. Okay. So that's a thing. It cracked me up. I had never noticed that before.
Yeah, he rules in comfort.
Dude, if I was going to be the Emperor, I'd be like, yeah, dude,
right?
Bathrobe and slippers, let's do this.
Yeah.
And he pulls it off. Sorry, what was that? What was that, Google?
Oh, what the heck? My Google assistant, really? It brought up bathrobe and slippers. Let's do this.
I was about to clap so we could cut that out, but never mind. No, that's great. Yeah.
From the outro.
So one, I like this development more, even if that was what they were pointing us towards. I feel like going for the usual, it's just another big, like, that's a pretty conventional development. It's like, we've got the real big bad so that Kylo can be redeemed later because you have to have that. So that's all the Emperor was a plot device to give us a threat other than Darth Vader for Vader to turn against. That's all he was. And that's fine. That's not a problem. But just doing that again with Snoke would have been boring. And is actually one of the big reasons that we have so much debate right now and for the next 32 hours is about what's going to happen to Kylo Ren is because this movie killed Snoke and left it open.
But now we have the Emperor. Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe, but even Hux and freaking Richard E. Grant. Oh, I can't wait for that.
I know, right?
I can't wait. I love Richard E. Grant. Anyway,
right?
And him as an Imperial officer.
I know, right?
Okay,
it's gonna be so good.
But yeah, Hux
I might
and
have
Richard
a new
E.
favorite
Grant
Imperial.
can still provide the threat for him to turn against and turn good, but we can just have him step up and be the big bad that has to be dealt with. It can go either way.
Oh man, that'd be so cool.
That's what I want, but. And I keep vacillating. Like, we did our episode where we were doing predictions, and I was like, no, of course they're going to redeem him. And like, in the week since, I've been like, no, they're not. But it's so clear where they're going here. So, and I love that. Yeah.
We should write our final unchangeable predictions down right before we go into the theater.
Awesome.
Well, I think we're going to have to record them so people can see.
Yeah.
Like, we'd have to do it like right now at the end of this.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. I still want a few days to vacillate.
We'll just post them on Facebook or something. And then also I'm like, okay, try and step back from the formula. What you have from Snoke is a dude who had a couple cameos in the first scene where he was telling people what to do, and then in the next movie was a threat that one of the main characters took out. Like, that's actually not a bad use of what he was in the first one. It's just that J.J. Abrams has a solid knack for ominous vibes. He did a good job with that. And I can see how that convinced people that he was going to be bigger. But again, it's the step back. Is he used well here? And the answer to his death is yes, it serves a very specific purpose here. So there's a lot of points in this movie that's like, I'm going to get into in a bit, but it's like point and counterpoint. You know, a large part of what this movie is doing is introducing more complexity to the relative simplicity of the Star Wars world. But when you have a story with complexity, you have to have counterpoints to what your points so that you can fully flesh out like what you are saying, because there's more options than just black and white. So, for instance, you have this is one of the important things about Canto Bight and DJ in particular is, so this movie is setting up that political extremes are bad. Same thing I described him doing in Knives Out, is he's just going like, hey, if you are too extremist, you're causing more damage than you're helping. This is the lesson that Poe needs to learn, is that you want to be a good guy, but not an extremist. Like, the extremism is bad, and without Canto Bight, that's the only message of this movie, is, hey, don't be extremist. With Canto Bight, we see a neutral territory. We've got people profiting off the war. We've got people like DJ who, I mean, obviously he ends up profiting off the war, but like he's profiting off of anything. He's not involved with any side. He's neutral. Don't join. And that provides a counterpoint. This movie is not just saying that extremes are bad. It is also saying that, hey, standing in the middle and doing nothing is also not good. You want to be on a side. You just don't want to be too extreme. You don't want to be in the middle. So he is actually endorsing good versus evil, like pick a side, be on a side, is just don't be too far in either direction or too far in the middle. And without that, without DJ, without Canto Bight, that loses half of the message and really skews what the movie's saying. And we get a similar thing with Snoke. So Kylo Ren is very big on his let the past die, kill it if you have to, like get rid of the past. But without Snoke, that message could easily be misconstrued as just a classic cliche, kill all the Jedi. Like, get rid of the Jedi, let's just be rid of them. But it's like, no, this Snoke's death makes it very clear that Kylo Ren is really committed to that literal everything of the past die. Snoke is just the Emperor Redux. He wants Kylo Ren to be Darth Vader. I addressed this in our last time we discussed this. And this is Kylo Ren
Snoke
literally just cutting out.
Actually says in episode 8, when he's chewing Kylo out, and he's like, I thought you were this. He says, I thought you were Vader.
Yes.
He literally says that.
Yep.
But you're just a boy in a mask or something like that.
So what Snoke represents here is what the Emperor was. Like, Snoke is trying to rebuild his own empire. He's trying to be the Emperor, even down to creating a Darth Vader for himself with a more fabulous sense of style, obviously. But
I don't know. Vader's just so classic, you know?
No, more fabulous than the Emperor. I
thought you were talking
no.
Kylo Ren versus
I wouldn't say
Vader.
Kylo's is more Kylo's is Darth Vader knockoff cosplay.
Yeah.
Well done. I love it, but
He's the Dollar Tree Vader.
Yeah, kind of. He's the my own fanfic character Sith Lord.
He's Black Space Knight.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
No, Snoke is a more fabulous emperor, though. But that's what Snoke represents here. And then that's literally how people are taking him.
Use as a pair of giant sunglasses to wear.
I think he needs some Crocs too.
Yeah,
should have gotten the Crocs instead of the slippers.
I love it.
He probably had like a back brace on underneath that too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
girdle.
Some icy hot going.
That will never get old. Okay.
Underneath the robe, you don't see it, but he's actually got a life alert necklace for when he falls and can't get up.
But yeah, and it's hard to argue that Snoke doesn't represent that when that's literally how a huge chunk of the majority of the audience was taking him. Like, he was the next big bad. He was another. And this is Kylo going, no, I'm not just rejecting the Jedi. I am also rejecting the Sith, basically. I'm rejecting this notion, and then he's reaching out to Rey and saying, hey, let's do this together, which obviously is what Vader has done. Like, he's not completely stepping out of the cycle here. He's actually, he's so into the cycle that he can't. His conviction that he's so different from everyone else is actually just another way of being the same, like every teenager.
Yep.
But But it is an indication that when Kylo Ren is offering to her, like, hey, let's do this differently, let's rule side by side, we don't have to be enemies, he is sincere about that. Like, this is not he's not trying to manipulate her. I mean, he is blatantly manipulating her, but it's not.
He's sincere in the manipulation.
He is
not
sincere,
deceptive
yes,
about it.
This isn't some grand master plan or anything. He sincerely wants to do something different. He doesn't want to be part of all that. And without Snoke's death, that loses some of its shades of what he's about. If otherwise he's just another bad guy going after the good guys. Now he is a baddish guy who is actively just trying to cut himself off from all these old archaic forms. So that is at least part of why Snoke in particular is a good choice. And another thing with the subverting expectations complaints, that I just can't get away from the feeling that it is the strong formulas of Star Wars. That, like, we know where the formulas of Star Wars go, and there are a lot of people that are instinctively upset when it doesn't go there. If we could potentially have some alternate universe, like create another world where we could see how this movie would be received if it wasn't a Star Wars movie, I think nobody would have a problem with these subversions. Like, if this was a Galaxy Quest, like not necessarily parody, but like if it more Firefly. If this was a Firefly, like, hey, I want Star Wars, but I'm gonna adjust it. I think that nobody would have a problem with the subverting expectations. In fact, one of the people that gave me complaints about the subverting expectations is someone I have talked to about Knives Out, and he loves Knives Out. But the thing is, Knives Out is literally doing everything that Rian Johnson did with Star Wars. He's just doing it with a cozy mystery whodunit. And he's subverting all your expectations and doing things weirdly. And this friend of mine loved it. He liked it there, but he doesn't like it in Star Wars. And I don't want to be like condescending or anything, but I do think at least part of why it's such a kicker for people in The Last Jedi is because of just the strong formula that they've got in their heads of what Star Wars is supposed to be.
Yeah. Which is a tough thing to overcome after 40 years of...
Absolutely.
Of building it up. So.
And for me, though, it was, like, I was in more of a point where I was like, oh, they're just going to do this again. And, like, I'm not mad about that. Like, I was sure they were going to have Rey's parents be someone significant. I didn't want that, but I was sure they would. But then when they didn't, I was like, thank you for doing something different. And I think even just doing it differently is worth its weight in gold alone. Okay, I had someone complain about contradictory moments, particularly the one that they complained about was the contradiction between Finn's not allowed to sacrifice himself at the end, and that would have been bad, but Holdo and Luke both sacrificed themselves in similar manners.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, I hadn't really either.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
On the surface, that seems plausible. So
so I've brought up the point and counterpoint. Like that's my response to this. That this isn't contradictory. This is point and counterpoint. The point and counterpoint here is purposeful sacrifice versus careless sacrifice. Like,
okay,
Poe's risks at the beginning were bad, not because he wasn't achieving some goal, because he did achieve the goal in the end. Paige blew up the dreadnought, they got there, but it's bad because it was a waste of so much life for not enough reward, at least according to Leia, and I feel like we can trust Leia.
Yeah, you would hope.
Yeah. And then Finn's at the end, like we've argued about before, and I definitely, rewatching this, I still feel very strongly that we could have made it much clearer via choreography and setup and everything that Finn was going to fail at that. Like if I had the chance to redo this, I would have had Rose knock him out of the stream there, further away from the cannon. I would have had Poe call for the retreat sooner, before they were winnowed down to only 4 people. Like it's good that he saved those 4, but it's only narrowly better than what he did at the beginning.
Yeah.
I would have preferred that he called it off where it's like, oh, we've lost 2 people, this is just going to keep happening, let's save the other 11, save the majority. And I feel like that would have got it across better. But again, those are nitpicks for me, but the point here is that Finn was not going to accomplish anything with that. He was throwing his life away because movies have it's something that I got thinking about watching Rebels, where it's just like, they have in season 1, Kanan's been captured, and they're like, we've got a crazy harebrained scream that'll never work, but we have to try it anyway. And of course, literally everybody watching is going, well, obviously that's going to work. Mm-hmm. We all know that's going to work. because crazy harebrained schemes always work. Sacrifices might be painful and sorrowful, but they always achieve their intended goal. And this movie is stepping back and going, but that's not true. Like, we all know that that's not true. Sacrifice can be pointless. It cannot achieve its goals. It cannot be worth the goal that you achieved with that amount of sacrifice. You know, crazy harebrained schemes can be just that. Crazy harebrained schemes that don't pay off and actually make things even worse, because
you
that's
mean
exactly
like most
what happens.
harebrained schemes?
Yes, exactly. And that's exactly how their endeavor, their Canto Bight run goes. Is it's a crazy harebrained scheme that doesn't pan out and actually sabotages everything inadvertently. Which is not how these things are supposed to go. We all know that crazy harebrained schemes are supposed to be successful. We all know that heroic sacrifices are supposed to be heroic and meaningful and work. And this movie does give us some of that. It gives us crazy harebrained schemes that work, and it gives us sacrifices that are meaningful sacrifices. Like when Holdo sacrifices herself, she achieves a meaningful goal of slowing down the First Order enough, like not taking them out completely, but slowing them down enough for the rebels to get, or the resistance to get down into their protective base. And obviously they still show up with force, because that wasn't a 100% we've taken out everyone, but it was a slowdown. She achieved her goal. She saved a lot of lives. Luke sacrifices himself to save these people, and he does so successfully, and he's achieving multiple goals there too. He's saving the resistance, but he's also getting the chance to address Kylo Ren and get across to him that, like, hey, I'm gonna be here. See you around. And so that's the distinction between, without Finn's moment there, then we could have construed this as of course, sacrificing yourself is great. Like, it adds more depth and nuance, and addresses the idea that, look, there are shades of gray here. Sacrifice can be good and meaningful and heroic, and there's nothing wrong with cheering people who make that ultimate sacrifice, lay down their lives for their friends. But on the other side of things, just because you have a crazy harebrained scheme doesn't mean it will work. And that's, I like that we're introducing that concept to Star Wars. That, like, hey, we can do more. The romance is unearned is one that can play between Finn and Rose, and I would say that, well, personally, the reason for that is that it wasn't meant to be a romance.
Yeah, there is no romance.
Yeah. Well, and what romance is there is pretty one-sided.
Yeah.
And it's superficial. It's not even a real romance. It is it's a fangirl meeting one of her idols and going, "Oh, you're so cute."
Well, and then him getting taken down a notch and her seeing him as an actual person.
Yeah, sure. But, like, that's what I'm saying is, like, Finn, I don't think...
Finn is blatantly surprised by it.
Yes.
Like, he has clearly not had romance on the mind.
And again, I just watched this yesterday, and I was looking at the Finn and Rose thing, and I'm just like, yeah, Finn is mostly treating her like the fangirl she is for the first half of their time on screen, where he's just kind of like, okay, pat, that's nice. I'm going to go over here now. And she's like, oh, the heart eyes going on, and you're Finn, you're the hero of the resistance, And that's kind of the relationship for the first half, and then he gets taken down a little bit, and it's more of a friend vibe by the end rather than hey, I'm into you, and also we're on this mission together. Yeah. Like, it's...
Yeah.
I don't get a real strong romantic vibe from them.
I think from her perspective, I think he builds himself back up again. I mean, a noble sacrifice
but
exactly...
she's also no longer the fangirl by the end of
Very
it.
true.
Well, and personally, I would say it's not so much the first half as just their first meeting. Like, by the time she tases him, that's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, that's what I mean, is like that first thing is like, fangirl, heart in the eyes, like, you're the Finn, you're the hero of the resistance, ooh la la, and then, you're trying to escape? You putz, Yeah. And then he spends the next little bit building himself back up, but it's their relationship, I think... There may be something from her towards Finn still.
Sure, and it might build into an actual romance in the next movie. We'll see in a few hours.
Could, but I still get the vibe from Finn where he's kind of like, okay, you're cool, Rose. Like, you're part of the team now.
And that's why I put this in the forest for the trees, because I was like, I feel like this isn't what this movie is doing. Like, it's not trying to earn a romance. It is out of nowhere. Finn obviously reacts that way. This is a moment that is out of nowhere for both of them. It's not trying to build a romance. It's going, hey, she had feelings that she wasn't bringing up.
After another rewatch.
Oh, yeah?
Especially the Hutt stuff. Not that I'm necessarily rooting for it, but I'm just like, there was a lot more there
very
than I first
intimate moment.
thought.
Yeah.
Yes.
And especially like the way she's looking at him in the hut, I'm like, I can see where you Reylo fans are
coming
I can
from.
see the hill you're standing on here. Like, that's, yeah, okay. So,
Yeah.
anyway.
Okay, I'm going to try and speed through some of these because we still got so much. Sorry.
And we're already 2 hours in to recording.
Yep, no surprise there. All right. So you don't like Star Wars. The first one here is Rose is poorly written, and I apologize. I meant to email the person who gave me that. More than one. I've heard this complaint from more than one person. Only one person gave it to me in the survey. And I meant to email them to ask for clarification and never got around to it. So I'm like, okay, Rose is poorly written. How? Sorry, Daniel, if I'm misrepresenting your take on that, but I'm just kind of going with people's usual complaints that I've heard a lot. And so most of the complaints I have seen about Rose are generally that she is a flat character, that she's overly perfect and she has no real flaws, which I first feel is kind of an exaggeration. Like, she has flaws, they're just not story pertinent flaws. Like, she's obviously, like, she's naive. Like, she is committing the sin that the movie is specifically telling us not to, of she's looking at Finn and she's like, rose-colored glasses, he's perfect, and then as soon as she finds out he's not perfect, he is utterly devalued and he's horrible, and she's still she nags on him throughout the movie of just like, where she's just like, well, how are we going to get out of here afterward? And it's like, oh, I know where the nearest escape pods are, and she's like, oh, of course you do. And it's like, dude, Rose, grow up. The dude, like, the dude's, like, she has this very black and white mentality. And she does kind of evolve a little bit and get a little more gray, but not much. Like, that's not her. She doesn't get an arc, really, in this movie. Although, watching it this last time, you could make a bit of an argument for a bit of one, but if so, it's not that greatly done. Anyway.
Well, I think, yeah, she definitely grows up, but as far as being an effective story arc,
Yeah, but mostly her role
here. Also, my rewatch yesterday, I actually felt something for, like, the tiniest little spark of something for her sister who died.
Oh, that's good. You felt about as much as I have for Baby Yoda, huh?
Who is this new co-host to the podcast, Chris? This is just so...
We finally watched it again.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, seriously, like after a year.
Yeah. I mean, and to be fair, even I was surprised by some of my reactions when I was watching it last night. I mean, I was watching it with the commentary, but there were a couple things where I was like, I do remember that being a little more grating for me. Like, oh, okay, you know, if you want to do that. And this time I was just on board, so that was nice. But yeah, so Rose, I hear a lot of complaints that it's like, yeah, she's just there to tell Finn what to do and just tell him, be better, and that's it. And I'm like, okay, sure. She's filling a mentor role, but that specific description also would apply to Obi-Wan in the original movie. Like, he's never wrong over the course of that movie. He's just there to tell Luke what to do, and then as soon as he's done doing that, he dies. And as soon as Rose is done doing that, she passes out. It just takes her more of the movie. But Qui-Gon is a similar thing.
She's not as efficient as Obi-Wan, so,
that's fair. Yeah. But Qui-Gon does a similar thing where it's like he's never really wrong per se. I mean, on a grand perspective, you could argue that he was wrong to have Anakin trained, sure. But I mean, within the framework of that particular movie, he's generally in the right. He's standing up to the Jedi Council. Never anything wrong with that. I would say that just the fact that he is in argument with the Jedi Council does make him more dynamic. But and Chirrut was my other example of this, where Chirrut's role in that movie is to tell Baze, hey, you should have faith in the Force, and he just tells him that over and over and over again, and then dies after performing what arguably should have been Baze's moment of actually stepping out, walking across the beach, and showing faith in the Force. But that's all he does, is he's just there to tell Baze what to do, and he's never wrong at any point in the movie. He's perfect. But we're all okay with Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, Chirrut, and similar characters in other movies, but not Rose Tico. And there are various reasons why this might be happening, or I'm not going to comment too much on a lot of them, but I will say that my sister had a conversation with a coworker, which was quite interesting. So this coworker felt that she's just like, her problem with Rose Tico was they just polished away any sort of problem or anything of that, and it's because because they want to appeal to Chinese markets, and so they're putting a Chinese character in there, and they're just making her perfect to appeal to China. They don't dare make her flawed in any way or a villain or anything, and it's just pandering. And my sister was like, well, I mean, I have the art books, and she was actually white in all the original concept art. Like, she didn't become Asian until they cast Kelly Marie Tran. So I don't know if that holds up. Also, just a sec, let me Google. Yeah, Kelly Marie Tran is Vietnamese.
I was going to say, I was just looking that up.
I was going to say. I was literally
Oh,
sitting
you
here
should have
thinking.
seen the look on their faces.
Oh,
They're both so
man.
animated. Like, yes!
No, I was literally thinking, I'm like, okay, when Chris takes it, when Chris pauses, I'm going to chime in and be like, I'm pretty sure she's Vietnamese, though.
Well,
Like,
see, and I was like, I don't think she's Chinese. So I was literally
I
just pulling
saw
up
Ross
IMDb.
grab his phone, and I'm like, I bet Ross is looking up where Kelly Marie Tran is. I'm going to beat him, though. I bet I could say this before Ross finds it. She's totally Vietnamese. Like,
And so, I mean, that doesn't mean that they couldn't have that in
well,
mind,
and
but...
to the coworkers' credit, like, Disney catering to Chinese markets is a real thing that happens.
Every movie
So,
studio right now.
Yeah.
That's a major market.
Well,
but Disney in particular. So it's like, so you're not like totally out in the weeds with that theory.
Sure, yeah.
But the other evidence being present where she's in all the concept art, she's white, Kelly Marie Tran's Vietnamese, like it's
And from what I've heard, what Ryan Johnson mentioned in the commentary is the main bulk of rewriting was just making her more optimistic and happy because Kelly Marie Tran was just they wanted her to be more cynical and she just couldn't because she was Kelly Marie Tran. And I'm now, who knows, after
to be fair,
years
I don't
of
know if
dealing
I could
with
be
Last
cynical
Jedi,
if I were casting Star Wars.
yeah, that's fair. Well, I mean,
I'd
who
be
knows?
ear to ear the
After
whole
years
time.
of dealing with crap online over The
that's
Last
true.
Jedi, maybe she's cynical by now, but I hope not.
Yeah.
Anyway, but this is one where I'm just like, I mean, she's flatter than a lot of what's going on screen, but personally, I just feel like that's because there's 5 freaking character arcs in this movie that are so dynamic and interconnected. It's inevitable that some of the side characters, some of the characters that are giving advice and trying to pull characters are going to be flatter because they always are. And so it's but especially by comparison to all of them, yeah, she's going to come across as a little more flat. And also, like I mentioned in one of our other episodes, I feel like that it's a bit that she's not the usual archetype. She's not the old wizened commander woman who's, she's not the rough and tumble scoundrel who world weary and knows a lot of the world and can tell us. She's kind of a frumpy nobody who's a bit of a nag. She's more of a mom character, but without being a mom, which is even worse. And I feel like that grates on a lot of people. Like, it's just that's not who they want advising them. Like, it's like if I want,
which is understandable.
If I want my mom nagging on me about how I need to be a better person, I'd turn off Star Wars and go upstairs. But I'm not going to do that.
Oh, that was good.
So this one was an interesting one. I had one that went on for a bit of length about how there's obviously no plan for this series. It's going like it's so inconsistent and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And so I had I was looking at this and I was like, okay, first, the plan seems obvious to me. Like, it all interconnects. I got several ideas of where they're probably going with this. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. But to say that there's obviously no plan, like, I will say, yeah, there's obviously, like, there's a lot of rushing and there's several chefs in the kitchen. That doesn't mean that they don't have a consistent plan of where they're going. Sorry, I mean, I can see it. But then second, I was like, the tone of this, there's a lot of stuff
Chris,
that was...
So where are they going then? Kylo Ren redeemed? Yay or nay?
Possible. I don't think they are. Like, if I were writing this, I would not go there. But I feel like the plan is to go to more of a neutral ground. Anyway, we've discussed that. But then the second is that he had several references to just like, this whole trilogy is just this, it's just that. And I was sitting there, I was just like, dude, you haven't even seen the third movie. Like, he had several points in there where he said, like, this trilogy is doing this, or it will have done this at the end. It's not building to anything. And I'm like, you can't make those kind of judgment calls right now. I mean, we'll see in 32 hours. But, I mean, that's a little hasty at the moment, at the very least. And that sort of thing does crop up a lot from people, though, where they're just, like, making broad judgments about what this movie is doing. And I feel like it very much is just that, like, we know what the formulas are supposed to be. It's not following them, therefore it's broken and chaotic and it's a mess. And it's just like, no, if you'd step back and look at it, you'd see that it's actually quite coherent. So the sequel trilogy, so this is the second half of the resetting things to where they were, is resetting the Empire and Rebellion dynamic especially in Force Awakens, but maintaining that here. Which and without any explanation in Force Awakens, which is fair. Like, I that was quite jarring for me, where it's just like, okay, so how did things get here? And one of his parts of his complaint here were that it's like, it makes no sense, like how this dynamic could have gotten to this point. And I was just kind of like you don't just have an empire defeated and then just come back 30 years later. And I was like, well, I'll toss that one at Kyler, like historian. Yeah. Is that because I basically looked at that and I was like, yeah, like how the French overthrew the monarchy and then didn't have any singular rulers at all after that. Oh wait, no, yeah, straight over to Napoleon after that. Yeah. Oh, but then Napoleon got overthrown, and it's not like he came back at all. Or oh wait, no, this is basically just Waterloo, but Napoleon was successful. Yeah. Like, I mean, off the top of my head, that's what I had, but I'm like, I don't find it that unbelievable that you could have a resurgence of, like, the British overthrew their monarchy with Oliver Cromwell and then brought it back.
Yep.
Like, that happens a lot in history. And this is basically just, we drove them out, and now they're back because they didn't die off completely. Like, it's Germany having another World War II.
Yep.
Another World War.
Yeah.
Cool. But the reason this is in the So You Don't Like Star Wars category is because resetting the dynamic of things to the powerful empire versus the plucky underdogs is something Star Wars has done constantly. The original Thrawn trilogy, this is totally what it was trying to do. It's coming up with excuses for, we can't call in the entire New Republic military because of this, this, and this, so we're just going to have to make do with this, and the Empire has suddenly become so powerful because Thrawn's basically just a god made flesh. and so we're back to that dynamic. Or you have the Phantom Menace, where it's just like, oh yeah, we've got the New Republic, there is no empire, oh but wait, there's this trade federation, and they've taken over this planet, and they're the dominant power here, and because they're not giving us any help, we're just a band of plucky underdogs sneaking around and rebelling against these people. And that is something that Star Wars has always done. Star Wars is constantly looking for excuses to reset that dynamic. I'll grant you that, especially within the movies themselves, they did not really bother to come up with an excuse for it this time. They're just sort of like, screw it. You know what we're doing. We've always done this. We'll just do it. And arguably a bit lazy, but at the same time, you could call it time saving. So, and this was a major problem for me when I first watched it. After being immersed in the new canon to the degree I have been since we've started doing this show, it doesn't bother me in the slightest anymore. Like, I know how it happened. I know the storyline. I know where they got there. It doesn't bother me at all anymore. So, maybe read more of the comics and stuff. That might help, but... hyperspace ramming broke the universe. Now, you can hear us talk about this in our last one. You can hear us talk about this on the episode of Plot Spackle that we did recently. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to go into it about the mechanics of like why that wouldn't necessarily be fiscally feasible, blah, 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 whatever. Breaking the universe happens regularly in Star Wars. And I just got a couple examples of it. And I would say a lot of these are somewhat more mild than hyperspace ramming in some ways, but I'm like, the Jedi powers in the prequels versus in the original trilogy. Like, Jedi are basically demigods in the prequel trilogy. Yeah. And they are not that in the originals, and it doesn't really make any sense why they just suddenly got nerfed. Battle droids. Seriously, like, the existence of battle droids, especially with the degree of competence we get from stuff like the Magna Guard, or even K2SO.
Yeah.
Like, if you have, like, why bother with stormtroopers if you could build a ton of K2SOs? We have had a very clear demonstration that K2SO is greater than stormtroopers on the battlefield. Like, that is a clear and obvious thing. Why are we not just mass producing K2SOs instead?
They're also kind of scary in Jedi Fallen Order.
I believe it. Sure. And so it's like, that kind of breaks the whole setup we've got here. If we have all these droids, why are we wasting time fielding soldiers? Tech in general became less advanced from after the prequels. Like, you move from the prequels to the original trilogy, and it's like, why is the technology... And it's not just like, oh, we've got better technology to display this. It's literally like, some of our technology was better beforehand. We've got better holograms. We've got better communication material. And like, it doesn't really make sense. You've got Leia remembering her mother makes no sense now.
Before we move too far, and as far as technology goes, I think that the creators recognize that and are trying to address it, because you'll see different like quality levels and different things. Like in today's episode of The Mandalorian was way back as far as like a holoprojector abilities go.
And they did do some very obvious efforts to slowly upgrade things as they went along, where we're moving from these ships to X-Wings, and that's, there are some clear things that they did. But then at the same time, you've got this like, okay, so we had these fighting crawlers that were, low to the ground, nice center of gravity, and we switched to things that could easily be toppled over with a string.
Well, yeah, with a wire.
And it doesn't make sense, but that's fine. But Leia remembering her mother doesn't make sense. Obi-Wan continuing to wear Jedi robes doesn't make any sense. If all Jedi wore this, why'd he keep his last name? This, that, and the other. The rule of two kind of breaks Return of the Jedi. Like, in the original, it's like, hey, we want to convert you to the dark side. And now it's like, oh no. Like, literally both the Emperor and Darth Vader were going into this with a full knowledge that one of them was gonna die if they tried to convert Luke.
Yeah.
And they just, for some reason, both went along with that. Just like, wink, wink, we're totally gonna convert Luke to the dark side, wink, wink, winkety wink. And it's like, no, that makes no sense. Nobody would ever want to recruit you. Like, it should be something that Vader's doing in secret behind the Emperor's back, or the Emperor is doing behind Vader's back, but there's no reason for them to work together on this.
Well, Vader does make the attempt on Bespin.
Yeah. But even so,
I
they're
mean,
clearly working.
Endor.
They're clearly working
That's true.
together by Return of the Jedi, though. Like,
well, but I mean, I guess that could be argued. It's Vader's plan. Maybe he's hoping Luke will side with him
you
anyway.
can build
It could be,
things to
yeah,
justify
you can make it up.
And that's the thing.
but,
Most of these,
yeah.
you can build something to justify it. A lot of things have, they over the course of the old extended universe or the new one, they have built-in justifications to explain all of that. I've got my complaint about the iron torpedoes in Rogue One, where I'm like, okay, if like one bevy of iron torpedoes can take out an entire Star Destroyer, like that's just about like I had to complain about the Dreadnought being taken out so easily, but I'm like, I mean the Dreadnought at least got 500 freaking bombs dropped on it. Like that's a pretty hefty investment there, whereas the Rogue One it's just like seriously there's like 10 ion torpedoes. I'm like, why is it that not we use proton torpedoes at all if iron torpedoes are that effective? And so like yeah, that happens regularly. These might seem smaller to you than the hyperspace ramming. But, a lot of these things got fixed in non-movie works, so will the hyperspace ramming eventually. Like, all we really need is just like, the shields would have stopped that, but when DJ hacked through their shields, he actually left their shields not working right, and so when she plowed through, boom, done, justified, whatever, as well as at least anything in Star Wars. So, the hyperspace ramming does not bother me. So, not what I wanted. We got a lot of things like Admiral Akbar dying. That was not enough for Admiral Akbar. Tossing the saber was disrespectful to the fans in the franchise, blah, 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 blah. Personally, I do not get the ludicrous reverence for props and characters. I get that we like Akbar, but I'm like, if we look at the movies, he was a dude who shouted some lines. Like, he didn't, like, as much as we've built him into something over the years, he wasn't really a character who needed a send-off or any of that. And maybe the best thing to do would have just been not put him on the bridge there. Like, Admiral Akbar died in the intervening years. Bummer. Oh, well. Like, but at the same time, I'm like the people's rage over, like, I have seen some people that are seriously just pissed over the fact that Luke tossed that lightsaber over his shoulder and the disrespect that shows for the franchise and the fans. And I'm like, I don't get this reverence for that prop. I'm like, oh yeah, this is important and meaningful. This is the lightsaber that Anakin used to slaughter a bunch of children. Wait.
Well, but I don't understand how people would get upset at that in the first place. What did they expect to happen?
And that's another thing. Yeah.
I mean, everyone blames Rian Johnson for ruining Luke, for making him this grumpy old hermit, but that's where JJ put him.
Yep.
Right? I mean, as soon as Han says he's disappeared, he went looking for this temple, and when no one's seen him since, what other conclusion is there other than he's in some sort of mourning?
Oh no, he's just been metaphorically working out this whole time so that he could come back and destroy the entire First Order fleet with one stream of
with his laser
powered piss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's just
Well, and there are some people that kind of wanted, like, I mean, that's obviously an insulting exaggeration of what most people wanted, but the next one I've got on here is they wanted more of the original cast, especially of the original cast being awesome. Our friend Ben Douglas from high school commented and was just like, he's a little disappointed that we only really get one crowning moment of awesome for Luke, and then he's just gone. I'm like, that's fair. I can see that. I can see that with a lot of this. It's, for me, I'm like, on the one hand, sequels becoming overwhelmed by the constant escalation of our original characters being even better than whatever characters we've introduced can get overdone and tiresome for me. I feel like they took a more tasteful approach to this than I like, but I can see how it wasn't enough for a lot of people. It wasn't as much as they wanted. That's fair, especially, and also the, like, we wanted to see a reunion between Han and Luke and Leia. I'm not really hurting for that, but I get it. Like, I can get that attitude.
Yeah.
But I'm like, no one's ever really gone. Like, Luke's not gone. We can get more crowning moment of awesome, especially since The Last Jedi just established for us that Force ghosts can still use the Force. Yeah. So that's cool.
Well, and also a big part of the complaint that it kind of evolved into is they wanted to see one last ride with the whole team together when they usually weren't.
Yeah, and I don't blame people for wanting that. I get that, but it is I wanted this and I didn't get it. I have a couple that are in here or from my friend Carl from my writing group, where Carl, a lot of the stuff you gave me, I was just like, I feel like this is just massively subjective. Like, most of my responses, my first responses were just, what? No, it wasn't. So, sorry if this isn't as thorough as you wanted, but the movie wasn't fun was one of his complaints. It's just like, he's like, Star Wars should be more fun, and this was just so dour and downer, and I'm like, first of all, I disagree. I had a lot of fun, especially watching this last night. I was just like, this is fun. I'm having a good time. B, sorry, I don't care, even if it isn't as fun. Like, everything it does that I like here is worth the weight of the movie. Like, I don't mind it being less fun. And then also I'm like, this kind of shows the subjectivity of the what I wanted category, where it's like Kyler's complained about the humor being too light and marvelly. Carl's complaining that this movie's not fun at all. I'm saying that it's both appropriately serious and fun. Like, very subjective on a lot of these things. Sorry it wasn't fun for you. Maybe try again. I had more fun this time.
Fine. I admit it.
I didn't say he liked it. I said he had more fun. And this is one that's come up a lot recently with, there's a lot of people, I had a couple people that were gutted for just like, well, I feel like the extended universe did a better job of extrapolating logical events after the Battle of Endor, did a better job with developing character, did a better job of this and that, and I feel like this is especially prevalent because of those comments of Kathleen Kennedy's earlier that had a lot of the extended universe fans being like, you don't have anything to adapt, look at all this. I'm like, okay, when it comes to the extended universe, rose-colored glasses... the Legends canon had a lot of really bad crap. Like, people are just like, oh, this extrapolated character development better, and I'm like, okay, first of all, Palpatine coming back twice, Luke falling to the dark side twice, and then just conveniently coming back, like, no, like, you're glossing over a lot of stuff, or maybe you just straight up didn't know. Like, I certainly didn't read all of the old Legends canon. I actually avoided most of it, but I know a lot of the storylines, and there were some doozies there. Yeah. And, like, I recently picked up the Thrawn trilogy, the original Thrawn trilogy again for our Thrawn episode, and kind of read through some of it, and I was like, yeah, I sure was 14 when I read this, wasn't I? Like, it's not bad, but it's also not as great as I remember. There's some stuff in there that's just kind of, okay, whatevs. And so I feel like rose-colored glasses are a large part of people's reverence for the EU. And especially when it's like with character development, I'm like, no, there was no character development for Luke, Han, Leia, or Lando. Maybe a bit for Lando, but not for those three. The Triumvirate, they did not change. That's actually the defining characteristic of the extended universe. Luke's only character development, quote unquote, I'm doing finger quotes right now, was that he learned new and greater force powers. And then, but this was difficult, but then he learned another force power. And then he learned another one, and he became, and then the other development other than that was when Timothy Zahn took back over again with the Hand of Thrawn duology and was like, man, we got a bit of a Superman problem with Luke, and we can't have Ysalamiri everywhere, so maybe we should nerf this somehow. So Luke is going to learn that using the Force too much is too dark-sidey, and so he's going to stop using it so much. Which, this is the same person that complained about the characters being reset to where they were at. I'm like, that's literally what the extended universe did, is just didn't develop these characters at all, and yet still managed to reset them to where they used to be. Like... Like, the extended universe was not that great.
Impressive. Most impressive.
Yes.
Resetting a character without any growth.
Yes, it very much was. And the thing is, that is what a lot of people want. They don't want their characters to change. Like, their characters reached the end, and they have reached apotheosis. They cannot become better. They are divine, ready to ascend, and they're only sticking around for our enjoyment. I don't like that. And this is a problem that sequels often hit in general, is this problem of, like, there's an implied happily ever after our last story, but that can't be the case if we're going to do a sequel, because happily ever after makes for boring stories. So, turns out they didn't get their happily ever after, and that can be frustrating for people. Which is one I totally get, by the way. Like, that is frustrating. Okay, so part of my frustration in discussing The Last Jedi with people is that, like I said, with some of those categories where it's like they imply deeper problems, and so when I'm having a discussion with people, it just feels like I'm peeling layers of an onion away, trying to get to the real problem, and they're just sitting there like, no, this is the real problem. And I can't just say, no, it's not the real problem. Here's the real problem, because I do have some strong opinions on what I think are the bigger problems for most people. But I can't just do that because I don't actually know that. Like, I don't know what the real problem is for a lot of people. And B, that's extraordinarily presumptuous. Like, that would be a real jerk move. Just be like, no. What you think is the problem here isn't actually the problem. Let me tell you what your real problem with this movie is. Even I am not that arrogant. So I've had this problem over the last couple of years where I'm like, my frustration is, and it's also frustrating because I can't just sit down and delve through everything and just peel it away until I get to the heart of things because A, nobody got that kind of time, and B, people can't adjust their opinions that quickly. Most of us we can't really take in a slew of contradictory information and go, okay, yep, I was wrong about everything. We'll just dig in our heels and be like, no, I can only take so much of that at once. And so ideally, what I would have to do is have someone that was A, mature enough to actually listen to dissenting opinions and consider them logically and give them any sort of weight at all. And then B, would be willing to give me the time of day to talk about Star Wars just constantly. And C, would be able to do so in interim periods just every now and then, like say every 2 weeks or so.
Every 2 weeks, yeah, something like that.
And then see what they thought after a while. So, Kyler.
Yeah.
You were looking forward to that, weren't you? You had it all planned out.
I planned that out like 6 months ago.
It's a trap.
That's an exaggeration. Oh, no. So we had, I don't remember which episode it was. I just listened to it the other day too. But we had an episode where you mentioned that, like, you mentioned it's like, oh yeah, your problems with The Last Jedi, and then I made a face and you were like, it's just that, no matter what else goes on, you got some problems with how Luke was handled, and I gave you an odd look, and you were like, I know, we're not getting into it now. That odd look was actually a surprise that I was like, I don't remember that being that big of an issue for you in our last Jedi episode. So I was kind of surprised that was what you focused on there. And then on my drive home afterward, I was like, wait, are we there? Is that it? Is that the heart? Have we gotten to the heart of the issue? We might have. So, Kyler, what was your problem with Luke? Like, let's talk about Luke.
I'm pretty sure I did bring this up in the first.
You did some, but we didn't really delve into it, and you still brought it up as your problem that time. So I was curious.
Yeah. And it came up as more of like the general.
Because I've specifically left out the Luke-related complaints thus far, so that we could save Luke for the end.
We see Luke in the original trilogy. He starts out as naive farm boy, and then he gets his naivete shattered with Alderaan, and starts to learn the Force. He grows. He does a decent amount of character development and growth. And by the beginning of Return of the Jedi, even he is confident in himself as, I am Luke Skywalker, Jedi Knight. And then the thrones. That's what he says to Jabba. He's real confident. Yeah. He's projecting, at least anyway, that real confidence. But then we see the throne room with the Emperor, and I'd say he is pretty confident of life, even though he's still tempted by the dark side. He's kind of like, no, I'm a Jedi Knight like my father. I am making a stand. I am firmly in the light here. I am light side. You're not going to change me. Kill me if you have to. I am not going to do your dark side stuff. He's pretty decent character growth, Yeah. And I think along the way throughout the trilogy, we see him, even in dark or challenging moments, not give up his hope for those around him, himself, things like that. I know in the past you've said that, like, he's not really experienced failure on the level of failing at the Jedi Temple and stuff, but it's like, I feel that someone who has gone through what Luke has gone through, where you've especially like the throne room with the Emperor, you've faced kind of the ultimate personal temptation, to put it in religious terms, and come out the other side, come out okay, And so to have your temple, your new Jedi temple, your school, blow up in your face, to then at that point go, oh, well, I'm going to throw my hands in the air and I'm going to quit this life. to me, seems like the opposite choice of a character who's been through everything that Luke has been through. To me, it just seems like not something that character would do. I think the Luke of Return of the Jedi, or immediately thereafter, seems to be the person who would have been like, wow, that was a big failure. That was a big bust. Okay, let's try again.
Cool. Thank you.
Can I
Yeah, please.
comment? So, one of my thoughts whenever people complain about Luke is that they just don't understand fully the depth of what he would perceive his failure to be.
Can we get into that in just a moment? Do you mind if I...
Well, but this is what I'm saying. Like, obviously Luke is going to care for Ben. He's his flesh and blood. He's probably going to be the closest thing that Luke ever gets to a son.
Mm-hmm.
So I get that. But does a parent with a wayward child go, well, you screwed up, wayward child?
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
But a parent who had, I mean, and I guess you can always throw well, sometimes people do this, and maybe they did, but it just seems, it seems out of character that somebody would be like, well, because one of my kids, even my favorite kid, screwed up, I'm going to abandon all the other kids. You know?
And I'm just gonna. I want to see if we're going the same direction. But see, I think you definitely have what I would say is the full depth of the personal nature of the failure of this, but still the galactic scale of it. With him almost giving into that temptation to kill Ben, he almost single-handedly created the next Empire and the next Darth Vader. So I mean, with his personal connection to, or having fought so hard against that in his youth, to having created that in his old age, I think it'd be very easy for someone to be like, you know what, I'm apparently worse for the galaxy than I used to be.
I would disagree with that, because I could see that making sense if he has the thought to kill Ben before he's there, and it's kind of like, whoa, if I go kill Ben, he's going to go off the rails. You know what? Peace out. I'm not even going to go down that road. I could see that. But where he's going, okay, I've already now created the new Darth Vader, the new Emperor. That's a done deal. Whether I feel bad about it, whether it was, whatever, it's already happened. There is a new Darth Vader out there, and his name's Ben Solo. Two choices now. Do I, Luke Skywalker, Jedi Knight, throw my hands in the air and go, well, I tried, I guess. Bye. Or do I go, okay, that did not go the way I thought. I ought to pull myself up by my bootstraps and try again.
One thing I think you're missing here is that that's not what Luke was doing, is throwing up his hands and giving up. He very much thought he was doing the right thing and stepping away and saying, the Force will take care of this problem. It doesn't have to be me. Like, in Luke's mind, it's hubris to assume, he literally says, it's hubris to assume that I have to be the one to do that. I am clearly not fit to be the one doing this. I need to allow the Force to pick someone better. I need to trust in the Force.
And to me, that seems it, because Luke has at the core of his person, he's still that farm boy. He still is like, you ought to try to do good. And I have a hard time believing that Luke is going the lesser of two evils, because by stepping aside for 30 years...
It's been about 10.
Okay, maybe. Yeah, 10 years. Yeah, sorry. 30 year...
At most, maybe 7 or 5. It's vague. But
to step away for what Luke assumes will be the rest of his life and say, letting Kylo Ren and the First Order just have at the galaxy is less damaging than me trying to stop him?
Potentially.
That seems crazy.
See, that's the thing, is you're right. That's the choice Luke should have made.
Well, that's the choice he did make.
I'm saying the choice that he should have made was to go and fix everything himself.
Yeah.
And
that's what I'm saying, is that doesn't seem to make sense with the Luke from the original trilogy.
But people don't always make choices that make sense.
I agree.
I would argue that it does make sense, though. And and
it's an emotional choice he made and stuck to.
Yeah.
Rather than
selfish choice.
No, even more than that.
Which is not where Luke is. Luke is.
It depends on how you interpret some things, but like, so this is one of the two main complaints I've heard about Luke, and the other one is one I know you don't necessarily hold to. It's the Luke Skywalker would never even consider, even for a moment, killing his own nephew.
Oh no, that's
which you don't.
yeah.
But it is a prominent one that I
Yeah.
actually got a couple of in here.
No,
And
Luke
so,
has anger issues like his
Yeah.
father. That's abundantly clear.
So, and that's the general complaint is there's just like these, they don't understand the character they're writing. And my response to that, generally speaking, is no. They've actually gone through with a fine-tooth comb to do their best to understand this character. If you're complaining about it, you might be the one who doesn't understand this character. So, looking at Luke's story, so I want to try and recontextualize a bit of what's going on there, because like a lot of people gloss over what happened in the originals, and that makes it hard to see why it makes sense in the sequels what he does. Because, like, for instance, one of the people that I had complaining about this was like, you're going to tell me that a guy spent 2.5 movies trying to save his father, and then he went, and I was like, whoa, hold up there. Like, see, that happens all the time when I'm talking to people. I constantly get those, the guy who saved his father, and I'm like, okay, first of all, he didn't spend 2.5 movies trying to save his father. He spent two movies actively working against him, one straight up willing to try and kill him, and then spent the third movie going, I would want to redeem my father, which, depending on how you want to contextualize that, could be a similarly cowardly decision of, well, I can't just kill my father. Like, I can't be the one to kill my father. He's my father. It's like, oh, great, so now that he's related to you, you can't save the galaxy by just getting rid of this bad guy. Great, that's some moral cowardice right there. But
except that Luke specifies why he's unwilling to kill him. He's like, there is good in him.
There is good in him, yeah,
him.
sure. And I'm not disagreeing with that. But you could argue that, yeah, he's saying that, but that there might be some moral cowardice behind the decision. And I'm not necessarily saying that is what's going on. I'm not saying that. But now that he has this familial relationship, now that he's felt that good, he does not want to kill his father. Like that, he can't do that. He straight up says, I can't kill my father. And Obi-Wan says, well then, the
Emperor has already won.
Yes, thank you. And so that's a misrepresentation, and most people do that. You know, I get a lot of people that are just like, you're telling me that the guy that put everything aside to save his father would even consider killing his nephew? And I'm like, no, I'm saying that the guy who decided to just risk his life to save his father and then ended up doing his very best to murder his father in a screaming rage, yeah, that guy might briefly consider killing his nephew. So I want to go through that one more time. I've done this in another episode, but I want to lay the groundwork for anyone who hasn't listened to those real quick. So Luke decides he can't kill his father. He's felt the good in him. He knows there's still some there. And against the advice of both of his masters, even against the advice of Leia, who tells him to get far away, like again, against the advice of everyone around him who knows anything about the situation, he says, no, I'm going to go redeem him because there's still good in him, which arguably is an extremely naive decision. And Luke gets very lucky that it happens to work this time. But so he goes in there, he's like, I'm not going to fight my father, I'm not going to fight. And then he's looking out the window, and the rebels have been trapped, and the Emperor reveals that, oh, nope, this is what's going on, all your friends are going to die. Trying to lure him to the dark side, strike me down with all of your hatred. Your journey to the dark side will be complete. And Luke's like back and forth, and then, yep, he goes for it. Which, you know...
Well, and it was even also after Vader himself needles at and puts his sister in danger.
Oh, no, but before we get to that, this is the first time.
Yeah.
First time he goes for
the
Emperor.
when he goes for the Emperor.
Yeah,
okay.
he
Yeah,
force
not Vader.
grabs the
which
lightsaber and
arguably isn't
goes-
that dark of a choice. Mm-hmm. Like, this is the bad guy. This isn't killing his father that he's felt
And
good
you
in.
could see Luke going, okay, well, even if the rebel fleet dies, if I can at least take the Emperor out while I'm here, then that's a thing.
So, but then Vader steps in, they end up fighting, and at some point, presumably, you know, like probably a bit off screen, Luke apparently comes to the realization that, holy cow, this is exactly what I said I wasn't going to do. I'm fighting my father. Like, okay. And he backs off, says, I'm not going to fight you. Vader says, well, I'm going to throw my saber at you instead. And then he hides in the darkness and just like, no, I will not fight you. And then that changes. And why does that change?
Because Vader starts threatening those he loves.
Yes. And as I've pointed out before, it's barely a threat. Like it's
yeah,
like,
it's
well,
very
you know,
veiled.
Maybe she'll turn to the dark side is hardly the most vicious threat whatsoever. But it's a bit more than that. It's not just that he's threatening, because it's like his sister was in danger before. It's not just that this is a personalized threat now. And the reason why that one hits so hard comes just before that. You have a twin sister. Your feelings have now betrayed her too. Leia's not in danger because the rebels came up with a plan and it turned out it was a trap. Leia is now in danger because Luke, naive, determined Luke, said, nope, I don't care what everyone is telling me. I am going to chance it all and go save my father. I can risk my own life, but now it turns out that he has risked someone else's life that he did not mean to because he was naive. Because he did not think this through, because he just bullheadedly ignored everyone else, and now his sister is in the crosshairs because of him. And that is what makes that second one different. That's why he really loses it that time, is because not just that there's a threat to his loved ones, which is a trigger for all Skywalker men, but because the trigger was, like, it's his fault that it happened.
Yeah.
That's going to come up later.
He's his own trigger.
Yeah. So he loses his shiz, I feel is the best way to describe what happens there. And in a screaming rage, attacks his father, despite that being literally the one thing he said he wasn't going to do here. And he, and to the point where he's just battering him in a screaming rage, lops off his hand, and what pulls him out of it?
The fact that he sees himself becoming his father.
Nope. What pulls him out of it is that Emperor Palpatine starts the premature villain glow. Yeah. And Luke goes, wait, what? And then he looks down and sees his father's hand and goes, but what drags him out of it is that the villain started gloating prematurely, like classic premature villain gloat. And then he sees, holy crap, not just that he's doing just what he said, but he's like, I'm doing what my father did to me. Like, I have just chopped off his hand. And so what does he do?
That's when he throws away the lightsaber.
He throws away the lightsaber. Why?
So that he won't be tempted anymore.
So that he can't do it again, because even in that moment of going, whoa, no, stepping back from the precipice, he knows that he can still end up there again. That is always, always a possibility. So he throws the lightsaber away, removes the temptation entirely, says nope, then he starts getting electrocuted, and we know what happens after that. It works out. His naive gamble turns out to be on the money, because sometimes that is the case. Sometimes naivete pays off, and people do rise up to your hopes and expectations for them. Sometimes they don't. So now Luke walks out of that, and he's kind of living on the same thing that a lot of people are. So many people that completely forget that Luke nearly murdered his father, despite that being exactly that he wasn't going to, and just remember Luke as the guy who saved his father when everyone said he couldn't, put his life on the line to save his father. And that is the reputation that Luke is walking around with in World 2. Like, have you ever seen? So we are all LDS. We all served missions. I had many occasions on the mission where we were trying to help someone. Not necessarily, it wasn't the proselytizing or any of that. It was just trying to help people dealing with addiction of various sorts. Right? That was the thing that you did pretty often.
Yep.
Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it did not. Did you ever see someone, either on the mission or at home or anything, who had only really had one experience with helping someone dealing with addiction, and it worked like a charm? Everything, like 12 steps, everything, like, went in. I did. I had a companion on my mission. He had just started, and we had a man who we were walking home one evening, and he and his wife stumbled by us. They were drunk. And he just dropped to his knees in front of us sobbing because he had been trying for so long to break his alcohol addiction, and he just could not do it. And he begged us to help him. And so we said, yeah, of course. Like, we weren't, we talked about the church. We talked about, like, why this helps and everything, all that. But, like, the core of what we weren't meeting with them to convert. We were meeting with them to help him overcome his alcohol addiction. And he did. Just like that. Like, it was literally, we just showed up, and we started trying to help him, and everything went perfect. He had just needed the extra hand. I would, arguably, obviously, I would say he needed God's help, but, it's like, it worked out. That's the point I'm making here. And that definitely did color my companion's approach to how he dealt with, like, next time we met someone who was having those addiction problems and needed help, he was still naive, He was going into that with this approach of like, oh, all we have to do is follow the steps and we'll help him and it'll be fine. And that's not how it usually works out, though. It's like dealing with a bully. You know, you always tell kids, it's like, oh, you need to find a way to talk to them. You can talk around it. And if you have a kid who has managed to talk their way out of the problems, who has addressed a bully, and that's all that's ever worked out, they might conceivably think that, oh yeah, that's all I'll do. And then one day, inevitably, they're going to run into a bully who can't be talked to. One
time, I literally got away from a bully by pulling the look over there trick.
That's...
He did not fall for it the second time.
Yeah. But that's the thing, is like, you get told this is the way to handle that, you got to be strong, help them get through, be there for them when they're dealing with the addiction, or talk to the bully, find some common ground, you can work things out without violence. And so you have a kid, they try that, they talk to the bully, and it turns out it worked, and they're like, great, I got told that worked, and I tried it and it did work. And so the next time they go into that situation, they're like, oh, I've done this before, I've talked to bully down, I can make friends with this one too. And then they end up with their face beaten in because that bully could not be talked to. Not all bullies can. Having helped one person does not mean that you can help a similar person in a similar situation. All people are different, and just because you've done it once doesn't mean you can do it again. So Luke going to help Ben.
That's actually why I think Kylo won't be redeemed.
That's my main reason too.
Because it's such a rare thing, and again, as I was watching this, where Luke is like, look, when he's talking to Rey on Octo, he's like, look, you don't know what you're getting into. Like, this is not going to turn out the way you think. I thought, I bet $100 this is Rian Johnson straight up telling the audience, y'all think this is going to be a redemption story. This is not going to turn out the way you think. And of course, it definitely doesn't within Last Jedi.
Yeah.
And I'm just going, but really though, like, what were the odds that Luke was able to break through to Vader and touch his heart? After 20 years, give or take a couple, of Vader being like, just straight up, yeah, Emperor, I'll do whatever you say. Like, that's an incredibly long shot, and I almost felt like Luke was about to say, it's a miracle that it worked for me and my dad in the first place. Yeah. Don't go try this,
That's what he's trying to convince Rey. Like, the odds, because he's learned now. So he was naive in The Last Jedi, or in Return of the Jedi, but it paid off, because that does happen. Like, sometimes when we try what we're supposed to do, it does work how it's supposed to. And especially because, Vader then immediately died, so Luke didn't actually have to deal with the years of fallout of learned behavior that Darth Vader's not going to just toss away or overcome, about how much Darth Vader actually had changed, or whether he just is putting his son ahead of the men he apparently, according to the Rule of Tool, was going to kill anyway. So it's not that much of a big moment to decide to kill this guy. But even putting that aside, just taking the originals on their own, like, saving your son is not necessarily the same as now I'm a good guy, but Luke didn't have to deal with that. It's just a one-done redemption simple story. It was a simple story. It was meant to be a simple story. That's great. But so now let's extrapolate from that. Years later, Luke has got his Jedi school. He's doing everything he's supposed to. He is the Luke Skywalker, the Jedi, the man who redeemed Darth Vader, who defeated the Emperor through Darth Vader, but like whose gamble paid off, who knew better than his masters. His masters told him that couldn't be done. That Vader was beyond redemption, and Luke proved his masters wrong. Proved that he's a step above them and their mistakes that they both made with their Padawans. And so when one of Luke's Padawans starts veering into the dark side, his own nephew, well, of course, Luke goes, I can do this. I've done this before. I'm going to reach out to him. I'm going to pull him back to the light side, just like I did with my father. Luke is still, unfortunately, somewhat naive. He's looking at this too simplistically. He's a little hyped up on his own story. Like, everybody's talking about the Luke Skywalker.
Which he does admit to.
Yep, he straight up says. And so he goes to Ben, and he goes in the night and is like, let me just get a feel for where he's at. And it turns out he was not as prepared as he thought. He did not go into this with the same attitude he had when he threw that lightsaber away, of remembering that the dark side's not gone. Like, I can still be tempted by the dark side. This can still come up. He goes into that just like, okay, I'm gonna help him. And he goes there, he feels it, and he gets shown that things are much worse than he thought. We don't see it, but we hear bits of his vision that he has there when he's looking into Ben's mind, and he hears people dying and realizes that, holy crap, all these students, the people that Luke is responsible for, that he cares for, are in danger. How familiar. That's exactly what's tempted Luke to the dark side before. And so literally, in the briefest moment, it passed like a fleeting freaking shadow, all of you people who are glossing over Luke. Like, this is not some dire thing that this Saint Luke would never have done. This is literally the exact same thing that happened before. He went to help someone. It turned out to be more difficult than he expected. There was a threat to the people he loved. And just for the briefest moment, he went, maybe I should just end this now. Maybe I should take the low road. And then it passed like a fleeting shadow, and he went, what in the world am I doing? He was so disappointed in himself. But it was too late. Even that amount of temptation, of giving into the dark side, not even giving in, just a brief moment, could be enough to start the cascade of everything he feared. And this is literally Luke's greatest fear. He wakes up, his Jedi temple is in flames, his students are dead or taken away by Kylo to become evil, and it is all his fault. And not the cheap ass like, oh, yeah, well, I should have done better, but, I'm going to try harder. Like, no, it's literally he went in there too proud. He didn't think things through. He didn't brace himself for the potential consequences. He was naive again, and he did the exact same thing he did before, only this time it went awful, and his worst nightmare just happened and is made manifest before him. And that could break anyone. Like, everybody breaks. There are two kinds of people in this world. There's people who have been broken and people who haven't been broken yet. and that's a hard thing to deal with. Like, Luke is in some ways an archetype. He is, you could argue that because he's a protagonist in a inspiring series that he can be above that. I would argue that that's not realistic, though. Like, aside from, the occasional Job, I don't think... And even Job broke down sobbing, was broken by what God did to him. He just didn't blame God. Like, he didn't get so far as to curse God for it, but he broke. Just not all the way, perhaps. But aside from the occasional mythic figure, everybody breaks. Everybody has a breaking point, and this is straight up tailored exactly out of everything we've seen from Luke. This is his worst nightmare, and anyone would break facing that sort of thing, especially because this is family too. Like, he has just shattered his sister's relationship with her husband. He has just created the Empire, like you said, on a galactic scale, and not just that, he's just discovered that he was arrogant and naive. Like, he knew the history. This makes it clear. He knew the history of Darth Sidious. He knew about Yoda. He knows about Dooku, and he knows about Qui-Gon, and he knows about Obi-Wan. And, he knows that Yoda trained an apprentice who fell to the dark side, and it had nasty consequences. He knows that Obi-Wan trained his father, and he fell to the dark side, and it had nasty consequences. But he thought he could do better. He thought he could do better than Master Yoda. Oh, wait, no, that was what Obi-Wan said. I thought I could instruct him as well as Master Yoda, is what he said. Obi-Wan's problem, looking back, is that he was too proud. He thought too highly of himself. And now Luke, who has spent years thinking yes, I'm the exception. I've stepped above that. I've broken the cycle, because this is a generational cycle. It's not literally parent to child, but it basically is. It's master to child.
Master to apprentice, yeah.
Master to apprentice. I've broken the cycle. I'm above it. And then everything comes crashing down because he did everything that they did, all the things that he said, oh no, I won't do that, I'm better than that, I've solved it, and it turns out he wasn't. He wasn't what he thought. He was not the Luke Skywalker. He was a guy who had done some really great things, but who was also really naive and turned out to have a healthy heaping of hubris, and it all came crashing down around him. And, we could, like I said, everybody breaks. That would break anyone. I don't have a problem. He was facing his worst, and even his glossing over what he used to do. Like, he's like, oh yeah, he wasn't naive. He was right. He wasn't proud. He was just saving his father. Well, that's what people are doing to Luke when they say that Luke would never do these things. Like, they're glossing over all his flaws, which is a thing that we do in real life. Like, people do that to their parents, and most we all know someone who has had a particularly rude disabusing of the notion that their parents know what they're doing or are good people, or like, that can come crashing down hard when you realize that your parents are not as infallible as you had the impression of. Even if you didn't really think that about them, you still have a moment of realizing they're just people. Mm-hmm. Your friends, your family, your leaders, your priests, you're like, whoever, they're going to fail you. And that, I think, is actually, like, I said, it would be arrogant to tell people, like, no, this is what's really bothering with you. Well, now I'm going to do it anyway. So, there are a lot of things that can deeply bother people about it. But I think one of the things that really gets to people here is that this movie specifically undoes the universal moral, is what I call it. So I think we discussed in a previous episode, I mentioned how most works of really popular fiction have the basic same moral at their core, right? I call it the universal moral. I've heard various things about it, and I've heard it expressed varying ways. But it basically amounts to keep doing what you are doing, keep going, because you are already good enough. It is the ultimate validating message of almost all popular fiction. It is the message of most big-time John Wayne Westerns. It is the message of Star Wars, Star Trek, Harry Potter, The Matrix, almost every superhero movie ever made. This is why almost every superhero movie has that get back up moment, is because it's not that this character needs to learn or improve. Like Miles Morales in the amazing Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, he doesn't actually learn anything. He doesn't work and grow. He just kind of realizes he's already good enough and then is. That's really common in superhero movies. Like, and he has his moment of getting back up at the end because now he's confident enough to realize that, yes, I can do this. And don't get me wrong, it's a great message. I have no problem with the universal moral. I love it. But I think it's part of what grates people so much about The Last Jedi is that one of the messages of The Last Jedi is, you are not good enough. The people around you that you depend on, that you look up to, are not good enough. Maybe they are doing well right now, but at some point, they will fail you. At some point, you will fail them. It doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter how capable you are. Like, I love, we've mentioned before, Star Trek, Picard's, it's possible to make no mistakes and still lose. That's not a flaw, that's life. That's not a weakness, that is life. I love that message, it's great. But it's funny, when you look at it, it's actually like, we're even going to take failure and apply the universal moral to it. Like, oh, if you failed, it's not because you weren't good enough. You're still good enough. You did everything right. You just failed, but that doesn't mean you're not good enough. And in contrast to that, though, the message of this is, instead of, it's possible to make no mistakes and still lose, the message of The Last Jedi is, it's not possible to make no mistakes. You will make mistakes. It doesn't matter how good of a driver you are. You can be the world's best stunt driver with a perfect driving record, and someday you can still take your eyes off the road for the exact wrong moment, and tragedy will be the result. And the worst part of it all is that it might not even be you that pays the price. You hit the wrong thing, and someone else, you come away seemingly just fine, but someone else pays the price for your moment of taking your eyes off the road. And that's exactly what happened to Luke. Took his eyes off the road for one moment, just one moment, the briefest instant of going, maybe I should take the low road. No, wait, what am I doing? And it was already too late. Everything shattered, and it is all his
and now Hosnian
fault.
Prime paid the price.
And yeah, the entire galaxy is paying the price. And that sort of thing, that sort of not living up to what you want, like just failing on that account. Like, I want you to imagine being the guy who took his eyes off the road and hit a kid, and now some family has lost their child. And even if it was a perfectly innocent mistake, it is unequivocally, unmistakably your fault. There is no avoiding that. And it doesn't matter how many times you tell yourself that it was a mistake, that it was innocent, you will never be able to convince yourself that it wasn't your fault. And you're gonna feel bad. That could break anyone, and has broken a lot of people. And it did break Luke Skywalker. That's a hard thing to live with. And that's even setting aside things that's just like, you get into depression issues, you get into all the sorts of mental disorders and things that can happen where it doesn't even have to be guilt or pain, where you just get sunk in this depression where it's just living with nothing, where you can't feel anything and you know you should and you want to be able to, but you can't, and you don't care about anything and nothing matters. And everybody's gonna hit something like that eventually. All of us. You won't avoid it. Maybe there's one or two outlying flukes out there, but the rest of us are not so lucky. We're all gonna break eventually. And there's varying degrees of that. But one of the worst things about it sometimes is that you get people telling you, well, you just gotta get back up and keep going. It's not your fault. You know, that kid, it was an innocent mistake, but that doesn't make it better. When people are telling you, oh, just get up, just keep going, when they're trying to tell you to apply that universal moral in your life, all it really shows you is that they don't understand what you're going through. Because you know perfectly well that you should get up and keep going, but you just can't. You keep trying and it doesn't happen, and because you know that that's what you're supposed to do, because you're trying to apply all the simple, helpful catechisms of your youth, and it just doesn't work, and you're still just laying there in a metaphorical or maybe even literal puddle of nothing, of misery, and you can't get out of it. And you realize that all of that was kind of just a heap of bullshit. That it wasn't real. The world is not that simple and easy. You can't just be good all the time and have things turn out good. That's not what happens. And sometimes there aren't heroes like that. People like the Luke Skywalker don't exist. This ideal that we're all pointing towards, aiming to, it's not really a thing that happens. And all we are is a bunch of just broken sacks of meat wandering around trying to figure things out. Sorry, lost my train of thought slightly. This is a movie for people who have lost faith. For people who have lost faith in themselves, or in their family, in their friends, in their leaders, or their priests, or their church, in God, or in Star Wars. In the idea that these stories are actually worth anything and have any meaning or relevance in a world that is actually like this. But people do get through that. People do get over that. People do pick up, even from things like that, and keep moving. That can happen. And the process of that often involves a lot of time, like Luke had. It often involves a lot of misery and hating yourself and trying and failing and failing and failing until you don't believe that it will work anymore. But maybe someday you will be able to make it work, and that process will be that eventually one day you get back up and you keep going because you actually are still good enough. It's okay that you're broken, that you broke under the pressure, that you failed, or that you did something horrible. You can still be good enough. You can still be that hero that you don't even believe in anymore. Because that's what happens to Luke Skywalker here. He is broken. He hasn't lost his faith in the Force itself. Like, he still believes that if he steps aside, the Force will raise someone up. But he has lost faith in himself. He has lost faith in the Jedi, this organization that he trusted in, the teachings that he tried to follow, but now he's seen this cycle of it just repeatedly not working, of Yoda failing and Obi-Wan failing and now himself failing, and the catastrophic consequences of the Jedi keep making themselves. And so he's lost faith that is a thing that can work out. He's stepping aside for the good of the galaxy, and it tears him up. But in a way, actually, yeah, it is just easier, because the alternative, he could go deal with the problem, but he knows now that he can't just reach out to Ben and make things better, especially because he's the one who caused this. He knows that he can't be the one to reach out to Ben, but the alternative, if he goes and confronts it, is that he has to kill his own nephew, which we've already established is a thing that Luke Skywalker does not believe he can do. He couldn't kill his own father, he can't kill his own nephew. He's not that hard of a man in a lot of ways. Even at his most bitter and pained and down on himself and broken over his failure, he's not a man who can just get up and go, you know what, I'll just get rid of the problem. So he's trusting in the Force that it will work it out, but he's removing himself from the realm because he's not worthy. He's lost faith in himself. And then someone shows up who does have that faith in him, and all he sees is how naive they are, how she just does not get it. She's doing what he did. Like, she thinks that he's just gonna walk out there with his laser sword and take on the whole First Order because things are just that easy. But Luke is no longer as naive as he was. He's hit the point that a lot of people who have their naivete shattered hit, of overcompensating in the other direction. It's a protection mechanism, you know? It's like, I have to protect myself from that pain again by not being naive at all. Like, by always assuming the worst, by not putting that out there. And he tells her off, and she just keeps being like, no, come back. And he ends up being curious enough to open himself to the Force again. To take a chance at feeling something, at stepping towards that just for a look. And then he sees that things are even worse than he thought. She is talking to Kylo Ren. Now she's going to race off to save Kylo Ren, because that's a thing that'll totally work. He knows better, just like Obi-Wan and Yoda knew better. And she doesn't listen. She leaves, and he goes, and that's when he hits his lowest point of, you know what, I'm just straight up burning down the Jedi Temple. I'm destroying the past. I'm killing it, because it's too painful, and it represents my naivete when I thought that this could all be real, and it wasn't. And that's when Yoda finally steps in and teaches him some important lessons. And the way that Luke ultimately picks himself back up, the way that, and it seems so odd, it seems pathetic, it seems less than it should be, but it is he pretends to be that again. He literally pretends to be that again. He projects himself as what he was, as the Luke Skywalker. It's this grand demonstration. But the thing is, it works. He does save the day. He does inspire the entire galaxy to step forward and believe that they can be that too again. And he does it even though he doesn't really feel like he is that anymore, or he can be that. He pretends, and he steps up, and he tries. And one of the most difficult things about that, by the way, is after so long of being broken, even when you start to hit a point where you realize that maybe you can get back up, you reject it because you don't want it to be that easy. Because if it's that easy, if it's just get back up and keep going, and it was all this time, then that kind of means that you wasted so much time. And you didn't, because you can't always just get back up. Being broken, being in that state is real. It's not something that you can just shrug off any more than you can just shrug off a broken leg. And so when you get to that point, it will feel like this is too easy. It can't be that simple. If it is that simple, then there's something wrong with me. That I didn't do it all this time. I've just been being irresponsible. I've just been failing all this time. And you recoil from that. You reject the idea that it would be that simple, that it could be, because it can't be. It can't be, because if it is, there's something wrong with you. You messed up this entire time. And that's not the case. It's you were healing. Like, you were dealing. It takes time. And you have to be able to accept that when you do get back up, it will seem that simple. It is just getting up, going out the door again. It is just pretending that things are okay, and gradually, bit by bit, they will be again. And maybe you won't ever feel like the heroes that you used to believe in, but the thing is, in this story, that's not really a meaningful distinction. Luke's failure, Luke's breaking, doesn't make him not a hero. Poe's and Rose and Finn's decisions that were with catastrophic results does not mean that they can't still be the heroes. Like, that's the central message of this, is that yes, the universal moral is not realistic, except that it actually is. Like, it's a lot muddier than that. It's a lot more difficult than that. It's a lot more painful than that. But at the end of the day, that thing that you had faith in before, whether it's the universal moral, it's Star Wars in these stories, whether it is you or your friends or your parents or your faith or your God or whatever, they can be there again. Those lessons are real. The universal moral is actually how you will get through things, even when it seems like it's so stupid and simple and naive. That is the end state of all this. And that is what differentiates Luke Skywalker from almost all other popular heroes. any hero can show us that we just have to keep going. But only Luke has really shown us what it will be like when we do. What it'll be like to step up out of being broken and defeated and pick up and do it again. And that maybe we won't be the Luke Skywalker, but we can still be Luke Skywalker. It's okay to be broken. It's okay to go through that. You are still good enough and you can still keep going. Luke did it, and you can too. And maybe because you've seen Luke's example, because you know this story and you've seen that he can still be a hero, you will remember that you can still be too, and maybe you can do it a bit better. Maybe it won't take you 5 to 10 years to pick out of that, because you know this story and this example, and you can move beyond Luke and his failure, because that's the point here, is for him to be something we can move beyond, instead of this unattainable ideal that is what people project him as, which is a damaging thing that we do to a lot of people. We expect them to be perfect, and if they show us weakness, then we decide that we devalue them. It has to be all or nothing, black and white. That a religious figure, a parent, like, once we see that they're not as good as we want it to believe, we want to believe that the opposite, that they were horrible, and we do that to ourselves. And it's what we do to Luke in this movie. Like, we look at him, so many people are like, there's so many comments in these where it's just like, oh, Luke's just lame now, or he's nothing, and it's just like, no, Luke is the hero. He is every bit the hero he was. It doesn't matter that he's flawed. In fact, he's kind of better that way. And he got up, and his example inspired everyone, and that is one of the values of these Star Wars movies. Yes, they're not real. Yes, they're often overly simplistic and straightforward and black and white. But just like Luke Skywalker pretending to be the Luke Skywalker changed the galaxy for the better, reignited the lost spark that was lost, like created... Lost spark that was lost. Luke, the galaxy was defeated. The rebellion was almost... The resistance was almost wiped out. But Luke stepping up and being that hero inspired, not just saved them, but also inspired them, inspired that kid at the end. That's the message here, is that what Luke has done is far more far-reaching than what we're just looking at here. He has saved the galaxy by being that example. There's a reason the kids at the end are not playing Rey lifting rocks. They're playing Luke facing down the First Order, because he is the primary example here. She is still naive. That's why I want in the next movie, I want her to reach a point that brings her more to where Luke is, or at least some acknowledgement that, hey, you have to be ready for this cycle to repeat itself. Because Luke's learned that now, and he needs to instruct her in that. But this is a movie for broken people, to show them that they can be not broken again. For people who have lost faith in Star Wars and anything else, that they can gain their faith again, and that it will be worth it and will support them. That they can take that chance again. And that's... Whenever I hear people talking about how this movie disrespects Star Wars, or it's no, this is all about how Star Wars will save the world. Like, how us believing in these things will make us better, and will lead us to the point where we can be that, even if we won't ever quite be perfect like that. And that's okay, that's great. We can all be the heroes. This is a movie that deconstructs that universal moral, points out that it's not perfect, and it's not always realistic, but it is still true. People who are, complaining that this is tearing apart Star Wars don't realize this is all about how wonderful Star Wars is. People who are complaining that, oh yeah, it got so close to being real and then just retreated back into just being Star Wars again. It's like, no. Yes, it did go back to being Star Wars, because those morals are true and important and meaningful, just as meaningful and important as acknowledging the grays and the difficulties. And so whenever that's my main question at the end, I guess, is just, if you don't like The Last Jedi, what did you want? What can you give me that you wanted that you really think would be better than all of that? That would be better than that kind of example and that kind of depth of both realism and showing how real Star Wars can be. It wasn't what a lot of people expected. It wasn't a lot of people wanted, but it is something amazing. And I love it. Obviously. So.
Well, I feel convinced on the Luke point. Thoroughly.
It takes me a bit of a run-up, but when I get there...
It makes me actually excited to go watch Last Jedi again with this perspective on Luke and watch it. So
I hope.
Wow!
I hope you love it,
so
man.
bad.
High fives are hard when you're recording for some
Yeah, they
reason.
are. It's weird. We're trying to keep our mouths next to the microphone, flailing up there,
Yep.
like Jar Jars.
Well, yeah. In the interest of saving you all time, I think that's all.
Yeah, sorry for everyone whose objections I skipped, but
I think we might have beaten the last Jedi episode
I was afraid
for
we'd
time
do that.
length.
Yeah.
Yep. So be sure to follow us on Twitter at More Civilized and join the Facebook group, A More Civilized Podcast.
Where you can find such gems as this one from, by the way, were people like campaigning for this now? Because we had lots of real good stuff in the Facebook group over the last couple of weeks.
I don't know.
I mean,
was
just
fun,
like, just every single post
been some
was
good ones.
Yeah.
better than the last. But I have to pander to those that are pandering to me. My favorite for this week was posted by Andrew Tanner Porter.
He's posted a lot of great stuff.
He has.
Made memes about us. I've enjoyed them.
Yeah.
Well, and that's in particular. That's this one is he has made comment of our favorite section of every podcast.
Oh gosh, that was so funny.
He's made his own meme, and it says, "When Ross gets to the news," and it's the scene from Lord of the Rings with Saruman looking towards the camera. So you have chosen newsy news. Oh, I laughed so hard for
dang
forever. So thank you, Andrew, for lightening my day
And
contributing to the group.
Cool.
Oh, that's right. It's still me. And you can continue to speak with me on Twitter at Random Paladin.
You can find me on there at Itinerant Baxter. I will also try and share on Facebook some of the positive things that y'all said about this, because I had a section of that and never really got into it. So thanks for everyone who contributed to this. I appreciate y'all.
we really do.
And again, enjoy Rise of Skywalker, and may the Force be with you.
Always.
I'm Anna Graves, and thank you for listening to a More Civilized Podcast.
Sold my body. Pay for my vices.
Yep. Please put that in the outro.
Sorry, what was that? What was that, Google?
Google?
Oh, what the heck? My Google Assistant, really? It brought up bathrobe and slippers. Let's do this.
I was about to clap so we could cut that out, but never mind. No, that's great. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. You're right. Good job on the fact check there, Ross.
Yeah. Hold on, I'm going to cut several things down. We'll smooth that right out. They'll never know.
Sweet.
Until the outro.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Unlimited
That's right.
He does have unlimited power.